Count Duckula.
Complete lore of Count Duckula explored. Alright gang, strap yourselves in, because today we're diving into the gloriously bonkers world of Count Duckula. For centuries, the Counts of Dula were the sort of blood-sucking nightmares folklore lives for. The stake in the heart, sunlight, all that great old vampire nonsense. But the twist is, the latest reincarnation of the Count didn't quite turn out as planned, and thank goodness it didn't. Because instead of yet another cape-swirling creature of the night, what we ended up with was something entirely different, a vegetarian vampire duck. Yes, you heard correctly. Our Count Duckula doesn't indulge in blood yuck. He detests it. He's more keen on broccoli sandwiches and carrot juice. Duckula never has a moment to himself in his misadventures. There's Igor, his morose butler, who longs for his master to welcome his evil heritage. And Nanny, a nice but haplessly klutzy giant who can smash through doors even when they are open. Nothing ever turns out as Duckula intended, but honestly, that's what makes it so great, and why we adore this wonderfully zany duck. Now let's delve into the complete lore of the series. And for more such content, make sure to like the video, subscribe to our channel.
I don't believe it. Up she rises, up she rises. Nothing of the sort.
Season 1, 1988 to 1989. Episode 1, No Sax Please. We're Egyptian. Count Duckula is sick of his dismal existence in Transylvania. Rather than a stereotypical vampire, he wants fame, stardom, and adventure. Igor, his batwing servant Butler, reminds him of his family tradition of dark authority. He informs Duckula of his forebear, the archduck Makanza, who hunted for the mystic saxophone of Pharaoh Zutin-Simoon, the first 17th. Legend has it that this enchanted instrument will grant control over life, death, and the whole universe. Duckula, excited at the prospect of both popularity and power, sets off to Egypt with Igor and Nanny in their magical castle. Meanwhile, a set of jewel thieves observes them departing and follows, believing that they will be able to nick the saxophone for cash. As they step into Egypt, Nanny mistakes desert sand for carpet and refers to the pyramids as big mountains. In the pyramid, Duckula is imprisoned by Wumite, the priest of Ra, and his lackey Yubi. They are determined to sacrifice him so that they can resurrect Pharaoh Upshi. Things seem desperate until Nanny bumbles and releases a mummy, which opens up, and inside is the mystic saxophone. Duckula takes it and begins playing. To the surprise of everyone, the saxophone actually works. It awakens Pharaoh Upshi and a group of mummies who break into wild dancing. Amidst all the commotion, Duckula and his gang flee back to Transylvania. Duckula fantasizes about utilizing the saxophone for a career in music, while Igor is concerned about its awful abilities. This is the first episode of the series, and it sets the tone with Duckula's strange interpretation of the vampire, more concerned with fame than with blood. The mystic saxophone is a spoof on mystical objects commonly encountered in adventure tales. I love how this initial episode immediately presents Duckula's offbeat personality. Rather than being frightening, he's goofy and goal-oriented in strange ways. Nanny's gaffes with the desert are good classic slapstick, and the dance party conclusion with mummies is just comical. A great beginning for the series.
Guys, anyone who didn't know would say you were a real bull.
Episode 2, Vampire Vacation. Count Duckula is tired of the gloomy Transylvanian weather and fancies a sunny holiday. Igor recommends a trip to Spain to see Duckula's cousin, Don Diego. So Duckula, Igor, and Nanny all take to the flying castle, looking forward to sunshine. Dr. von Goosewing, Duckula's vampire-hunting nemesis, inadvertently finds himself in Spain when attempting to gain entry into the castle by a hidden tunnel. At Don Diego's mansion, Duckula is appalled at how much his cousin is addicted to fire. Don Diego enjoys setting things on fire and becomes infuriated when Duckula and his team extinguish one of his fires. The situation deteriorates when Don Diego announces he intends to hack up the villagers and feed them at a party, culminating in bingo. In shock, Duckula vows to put a stop to it. Don Diego suggests an alternative challenge. Duckula will confront El Loco, the Spanish bull considered the most deadly in Spain. Duckula is frightened and searches for an exit. Igor and Nanny devise a plan. Nanny will disguise herself as the bull, while Duckula provides on-stage entertainment in the form of singing and juggling. Initially, the scheme pays off, but subsequently, the genuine El Loco appears. This creates a hectic battle between Nanny, disguised as an imitation bull, and the genuine article. Duckula and his friends manage to rescue the villagers during the melee. Duckula and his companions then hasten back to Transylvania, spent but unharmed. Here, for the first time, we encounter Don Diego, a darker relative of Duckula. The episode also has fun with Spanish stereotypes, such as bullfighting and fiestas, but in a ludicrous, over-the-top manner. I adore this episode for the humour. The sight of Nanny dressed up as a bull is absurd, but hilarious. And Duckula, attempting to be an entertainer rather than a battler, is pure of his nature. Don Diego is a frightening and hilarious villain, and the entire fiesta conceit is dark humour at its finest.
This mirror's filthy. I must tell Igor to give it a good clean.
Episode 3. One Stormy Night. On a stormy and dark night in Transylvania, Duckula gets hungry and searches for food. At the same time, Nanny is terrified after listening to a story of a monster that eats everything. She has no idea that Dr. von Goosewing is in his laboratory somewhere nearby inventing something new. A thunder and lightning-powered monster that will finally kill Duckula's family. Duckula is dispatched to the basement to retrieve a fuse, unaware that Goosewing is utilizing it in his experiment. Before long, Goosewing's monster comes to life, but instead of being frightening, it immediately requests aspirin for a headache. In all the chaos, Duckula and his group run back to Transylvania. Duckula daydreams about playing the saxophone as a music career, but Igor worries about its horrid powers. This is the opening episode of the series, and it establishes the tone with Duckula's bizarre take on the vampire being more interested in fame than in blood. The mystic saxophone is a parody of mystical devices found in adventure stories. Goosewing eventually traps Duckula with the monster, ready for the win. But, in the nick of time, Nanny crashes in and the sun starts to rise. The light sends the creature short-circuiting and disintegrating. Goosewing himself is knocked on the head, forgetting who he is for a bit. Duckula finds himself alive, but still famished. And the castle is back to its normal state of mayhem. This is an obvious parody of Frankenstein, with the mad scientist and monster being Goosewing and his lightning-driven creature. The addition of aspirin as a demand by the monster provides some humour to the horror scenario. This is one of my favourites early on due to the combination of horror spoof and comedy. Goosewing's overconfidence, the goofy creature, and Nanny's rescue by accident equal pure slapstick fun. And Duckula's food obsession is a universal and contributing factor to the comedy.
Voting person, you? Come on, my duck, it's all right.
Episode 4. Transylvanian Homesick Blues. Igor, Nanny, and Count Duckula are seen at a little fair at the beginning of the show. After Duckula became bored with the Dodgems, he saw this attraction known as the roller coaster of time and could not resist the temptation to give it a try. He was eager to go, despite Igor's complaints about how he would rather that his head be removed. So, after claiming their tickets from the operator, Dr. Time, all sorts of dotty things like a chocolate-filled skull and a partially devoured copy of Undertaker's Weekly, the three of them board the ride, anticipating what's billed to be the ride of a lifetime. They begin with a crazy blast-off, and before they can say Jack Robinson, they're transported to their first destination. They're starting things off at prehistoric Earth 1,000,000 years ago. So, they come across the very first vampire in the whole universe. And let me tell you, this is one big klutz. He's scared of the dark and has been running away from this huge dinosaur-like maiden all day because he tried to bite her because he thought she was food. Could you picture it? The rider needs to get back to it quickly. At that point, they go to the year 4088. Where talking, smart vegetables rule a world. Well, Duckula and Igor are going to court right now for some very major vegetable crimes that happened in the past. You know, turning them into soups and salads. Can you believe it? So when Igor lets the cat out of the bag about Duckula being a vampire, the veggies completely freak and pull out the garlic, causing everyone to hightail it out of there once again. At this point, Dr. Time reveals his true colours as a bad guy when Nanny declines his offer of marriage. In a turn of events, Dr. Time chooses to return them all to the French Revolution in 1789 as his means of revenge. Due to their ridiculous costumes, they find themselves arrested as aristos and are thrown into a cell to await having their heads hacked off. The crew devises an escape plan. Nanny will distract the guard while the rest of them creep up and whack him on the head with a heavy object. Nanny, ever ready with a souffle in case of an emergency, employs it to knock the guard unconscious and facilitates their escape as the alarm sounds. They arrive back at the fair. 5 minutes later, they departed. But the entire episode wipes out their memories, so they have a complete blank slate. Before they have a chance to process what has just occurred, the roller coaster announcement comes on again. Duckula, without memory of what occurred, enthusiastically demands they attempt the ride, repeating the same dialogue from the start of the episode and trapping them in a time loop.
Hall of Mirrors, eh? Well, now, that sounds exciting.
Enter!
Episode 5, Restoration Comedy. Restoration Comedy is just one of those Count Duckula episodes that mixes ordinary situations with the fantastical, turning something like restoring a house into a ghost story. It starts with Duckula bemoaning the condition of his family castle, referring to it as a massive, run-down, gloomy, ancient wreck, since he thinks the castle only needs a few coats of paint, some colour, some life. He wishes for something more stylish and lighter. His ambition reflects his persistent need to modernise, which frequently has disastrous consequences, as well as his departure from vampiric tradition. In order to make his dream a reality, he employs the services of Roberto, a flamboyant interior decorator who refers to himself as the designer to the stars. Roberto's ambitious plans encompass glass doors and an extravagant hall of mirrors, a ridiculously impractical addition to a vampire residence. Igor and Nanny are appalled. To them, removing the gothic atmosphere of the castle is a betrayal, and they put on a dramatic strike, refusing to lift a finger while Roberto goes about redecorating their house. This gives rise to one of the show's most hilarious conceits: Duckula attempting and failing to get on without them, hardly even able to repair his own snacks without them. Personally, I think this episode is especially cute because it showcases Duckula's ongoing conflict between tradition and modernity. It's more than just redecorating a castle. It's Duckula needing to reinvent himself as something different from the dark vampire lord he was meant to become. The Hall of Mirrors scene stands out. Roberto, boasting of his work of art, is taken aback when he discovers Duckula has no reflection to boasting of his artwork, is shocked to find that Duckula is not reflected. His desperate exclamation, "A vampire! A vampire!" adds a fantastic element of dread to the comedy. After Igor and Nanny return after their protest, everything goes completely crazy. They accidentally shoot a cannon in the kitchen while attempting to assist, destroying Duckula's ideal home once more. By the end, Duckula is starving, his castle is destroyed to half, and nothing has been altered, an ironic do-over that's straight Duckula tradition. Trivia. The title of the episode is a double pun, both referring to the literal home restoration project and the restoration comedy theatrical tradition, so known for its clever, haphazard plots. Appropriately, the actual story replicates that tradition, replete with misunderstandings, slapstick catastrophes, and grandiose schemes that fall apart into farce.
Die or we'll blow you out the water!
Do your worst, vermin!
Episode 6, The Mutinous Penguins. Count Duckula, Igor, and Nanny on a desolate ship in the frozen Arctic waters. Why? Because Castle Duckula has gone missing. Only in this series could a castle wander off like a pet on the loose. Of course, everybody begins accusing each other. Poor Nanny, as ever, takes the biggest brunt of the blame, though she does tend to break things, so it's not surprising. Duckula assures us he has everything under his thumb. He even produces a map and prides himself on his splendid calculations regarding where the castle will have to be. Alas, the captain of the ship, who happens to be, in classic ridiculous Duckula fashion, a penguin, quickly suggests that the place Duckula has marked on the map is actually the South Sea, a region with nothing but miles and miles of sea. That error leads to a mutiny. The penguin crew, all of a sudden, assumes Duckula is not in search of a castle whatsoever, but rather a hidden treasure. Their captain cooks up a wicked plan, kidnap Duckula and his servants, maroon them on a desert island, and steal the treasure map for themselves. The humour is that the penguins do not even need to be sly about it. Nanny, her usual lummox self, pulls off the ship's steering wheel, it would make a good chandelier, she thinks, and leaves the ship totally out of control. Duckula, Igor and Nanny get into a panic, think they are about to run into an iceberg, and almost hand themselves over. They are lashed not to a yardarm, like in pirate stories, but to a sofa, only in Duckula. Quickly they're stranded on a strange snow-covered tropical island. Nanny, being the motherly one, concludes the solution is to brew tea. And here's the surprise. The steam from her burners begins melting the whole island. Even crazier, her tea magically brings back to life a group of Vikings who had been trapped in the ice for more than 1,000 years. The Vikings, thanking the warm beverage, vow to assist in pursuing the nefarious penguins. Just when things weren't crazy enough, Dr. von Goosewing appears out of nowhere with his reliable vampire radar to catch Duckula at last. There's a cannon battle, but in the hullabaloo, Duckula and his cohorts leap overboard and plunge straight into Castle Duckula's dining room. Guess the castle was underwater all along. Igor matter-of-factly points out that the castle always comes home by dawn anyway. Duckula apologetically thanks Nanny, but quickly takes it all back, claiming that it was his intelligence that came up with the plan. Typical Duckula, desperate, egotistical, but in endlessly ridiculous fashion. This episode is an ideal blend of Arctic escapism and surreal humour. I particularly adore the Vikings being brought back to life with tea. It's a such British joke tea actually does fix everything.
Goosewing! You! And him!
Episode 7. Dr. von Goosewing's Invisible Ray. We see Count Duckula behaving in a manner entirely unvampiric. Rather than plotting something sinister, he is busy in stretching yoga poses and sulking over a ketchup stain. Meanwhile, Igor is baffled by serving a vampire who is more obsessed with cleaning blood rather than craving it. In the meantime, the always clumsy vampire hunter Dr. von Goosewing introduces his newest tool to combat Duckula, the invisibilitizing ray. His scheme is straightforward: become invisible, sneak upon Duckula, and once and for all eliminate the world of this so-called villain. Goosewing is so certain of Duckula's evilness that he refers to him as the most evilest, the most sucking the blood meter villain, stumbling over his own rhetoric in typical Goosewing style. To prove the ray works, he tests it on his assistant Heinrich, and, surprisingly, it does exactly what it's supposed to. Meanwhile, back at the castle, Duckula makes a career change. He intends to close down the Dark family mansion and re-emerge as an international sensation magician by the name of the Amazing Ducko. His ambition is to perform elaborate illusions and even make Igor, Nanny and Goosewing vanish, although not in the manner Goosewing has planned. The hunter strikes, but the invention malfunctions. Rather than hitting Duckula on his own, the beam envelops Duckula, Igor and Nanny, making all three of them invisible. What ensues is pure bedlam. Nanny, completely oblivious to her state, attempts to lay out afternoon tea, but ends up bumping into things and furniture, sending china crashing in all directions. At one stage, the flaky ray even appears to scramble their bodies, with Duckula insisting Igor's legs now belong to a complete different person. Goosewing, naturally, can't maintain control of his gadget. Falsely identifying Nanny's fur coat as the invisible Count, he zaps it and finds himself slugging a snoring article of clothing. Finally, his own gadget becomes self-defensive, shooting him into an absurd destiny, a one-way journey to the center of the earth. Duckula, Igor and Nanny become themselves again, with the castle barely escaping the experience intact. The episode ends with a cheeky narrator's comment about Transylvanian door manufacturers having record sales, a sly reference to Nanny's propensity for busting through doors instead of using them conventionally. In one of the show's more amusing pieces of trivia, Goosewing's invisibilitizing ray is just one of a number of episodes where his crazy inventions end up causing more trouble for him than for Duckula, a recurring gag that reinforces him as more of an idiot clown than an actual threat.
Stick is back for up, so maybe...
Episode 8, Down Under Duckula. Castle Duckula is now being presented as a house of horror, although within, Count Duckula is more concerned with Nanny's increasing forgetfulness. Igor humorously proposes a brain transplant, even going so far as to suggest using a cabbage for a new brain. Duckula puts the idea on hold and concludes that Nanny must go to a psychiatrist. He intends to fly the castle to Vienna, but ends up getting lost and landing in the outback of Australia, directly in the middle of Bill Platypus's wallaby pasture. Nanny confuses the wallabies as giant jumping mice and is frantic when they devour Duckula's lunch. Duckula apologizes by offering Bill an antique castle clock, which turns out upon Igor's revelation to be necessary for the travel system of the castle. Without it, they will never be able to go back to Transylvania. Meanwhile, Duckula and Igor scheme to get it back, while Bill pilfers the clock on his aircraft, but gets stranded in the bush with no fuel to spare. He calls for rescue, which Nanny thinks is the plane itself. Duckula, proclaiming himself an ace pilot, though he has never flown before, takes Igor and Nanny on a rescue mission. Their haphazard flight comes close to crashing into the castle, but they finally manage to rescue Bill. Mad with the clock's incessant ringing, Bill gladly gives it back, even offering them money to take it away. They fill Bill's jeep up with fuel and head back to the castle. Duckula nostalgically yearns for dark Transylvania, but when he goes to have dinner, Igor matter-of-factly states that he has shot the kitchen, leaving Duckula once more hungry. This episode is spot on in its portrayal of Duckula's impulsive decision-making. His kind act of giving the clock away almost gets them trapped forever. Nanny's confusion with the radio is a good moment. Bill Platypus is a single appearance character, and this is one of the few Duckula episodes filmed in Australia.
You villains, you're trapped. If you don't hand over the jewels, I'll get Nanny to surround you.
Hush, hush, hush.
Episode 9, All in a Fog. The episode starts with Duckula, who is trumpeting, getting frustrated with getting musical endings correct, and vows to compose a song without an end. He is in good humour after having cracked the mystery of the cheese grater, which he had found was being utilised by the werewolf living in the castle for a closer shave. Encouraged by this success, Duckula declares himself world's greatest detective. Convinced that he has all the qualities required, an analytical mind, an excellent body, mastery of a musical instrument, and his own magnifying glass. For his new profession, he determines the only fitting location for a detective is London, England, and the castle takes them there. On their arrival, London is actually blanketed in a thick fog, and Duckula finds it a lovely sense of tradition. To add to the confusion, Dr. von Goosewing is also present in London, trying to dispel the air with his super loop of fog collector, trying to get rid of what he perceives as vampire fog. He is shocked to find Duckula in London. The intrigue deepens as jewel thieves, who had mistakenly been incarcerated in the Tower of London for 47 years for pilfering the crown jewels, take centre stage. Well-known detectives Sichasso Soames and Dr. Potson are also at the scene. Nanny's usual mistakes take centre stage in the ensuing chaos. She is caught clasping a bag of the pilfered crown jewels, and astute, although misguided, Soames concludes that she is the master criminal. In the midst of confusion and suspicion, Goosewing's machine breaks down and the stolen crown jewels are drawn away in a big fog. Duckula tries to take credit for capturing the criminals, but his own desire for fame is again foiled when the castle sets itself into returning mode, which cuts short his moment of triumph 3,738. The episode also serves to emphasise the stock gag of Duckula's pursuit of fame being humorously sabotaged by events. The episode also showcases Dr. von Goosewing's inventions causing more problems for himself than for Duckula. The Dailymotion source indicates that the episode takes on a very surreal quality as all elements of the plot converge. The animated short is episode 9 of season 1 of the Count Duckula television series, 1988 to 1993. Episode 10, Castle Duckula, open to the public. We get to see Count Duckula grudgingly taking his dreaded monthly bath, only to be confronted with worse news. Castle Duckula is drowning in debt. They owe everyone, ranging from the milkman, with bills since 1963, to the undertaker, who is still waiting for payment on a coffin ordered 2 birthdays previously. At the same time, Nanny gets amnesia when she looks at a camera and naively longs to go to a castle. Duckula grasps the notion. If individuals pay money to go look at sites such as Versailles or the Taj Mahal, why not set up Castle Duckula as a money-making attraction? Believing it's a great plan to remedy their financial issues, he promotes the castle to the general public. Dr. von Goosewing sees the notice and readies his new invention, a vampire slayer that can make a vampire's reflection appear in a mirror. He intends to reveal Duckula on the day of the open castle. Visitors come in flocks, wanting to witness executions, pets of the family, and gory castle rituals. Igor, Duckula, and Nanny guide the tour, with Igor rather enthusiastically showing tossing the peasant, and Nanny giving a hard-as-a-rock bun at tea with the Count. Goosewing attempts to unleash his exterminator, but true to character, it goes haywire, not once spotting Duckula's reflection. The day ends in calamity. Visitors request refunds, placing Duckula in an even poorer financial position. Irritated, he vows never to stage another open day again. The finale gag shows Nanny succeeded in getting rid of almost all the visitors except one hapless tourist still lost inside the castle. This episode combines satire and slapstick perfectly, depicting Duckula's ill-fated efforts at business, while Igor and Goosewing are the stars of their own running gags. This is the 10th show of Season 1, one of the first to delve into Duckula's ongoing financial issues, a theme that crops up throughout the series.
Heather.
No, it's Rory McDuckula von Goosewing.
Hey, what a coincidence. My name is von Goosewing.
Episode 11, The Ghost of Castle McDuckula. In this episode, Count Duckula heads off to Scotland with Igor and Nanny. His big mission? To finally prove that the Loch Ness Monster is real using his ridiculously named invention, the high-technology, macro-sensitive monster monitoring machinery. Try saying that 3 times fast. Of course, Igor has his own agenda. He's hoping that revisiting Duckula's ancestral home, Castle McDuckula, will awaken some darker, more properly evil instincts in his young master. Spoiler, it doesn't. The journey itself is classic Duckula chaos. They travel in a trailer, and when they get a flat tire, Nanny ends up being used as a jack. Honestly, poor Nanny, her loyalty is unmatched, but she's always the butt of the joke. When they arrive at their hotel, Igor describes it as luxurious, but it's atrociously bad. The 4-poster bedroom is plastered with posters on the walls, and the jacuzzi is a wash basin with an egg whisk. Trivia: British comedy of the 80s enjoyed making fun of tacky hotels. Meanwhile, Dr. von Goosewing arrives because no Duckula vacation would be complete without his wobbly vampire hunter foil. His compass is broken. He mistakes random objects for monsters. And when he tries to photograph the hotel manager, nothing shows up because the manager's actually a vampire. Classic gag. Duckula also tries his wing at golf, but with Nanny caddying, dropping clubs everywhere, and Igor sarcastically heckling, it's a total disaster. Goosewing thinks Rory McDuckula, Duckula's ghostly ancestor, is a duck in the heather, and nearly blasts him with his vampire blaster. The big finale, they escape in a balloon, only for it to lose control and crash into the Loch Ness. Duckula insists he spots a vampire duck in the water, but Nanny shrugs it off and makes tea. And that's Count Duckula in a nutshell. Monsters, chaos, tea, and plenty of nonsense.
Right, I suggest we get freshened up and then we have something to eat.
Episode 12, Igor's Busy Day. Igor's Busy Day is a beautifully ironic installment that highlights Igor's endless frustration with his master's absence of blood-curdling inclinations. Right from the start, Igor laments that Duckula would rather press flowers with the bone crusher in the torture chamber, rather than accept the blood-soaked customs of vampirism. His wistful complaint about the old days, when generously extended offers of refuge to travellers ensured they were never heard of again, is echoed to the letter by Duckula's sunny lack of interest in these sinister activities. Nanny, as usual, contributes her characteristic sweetness by simply writing off Igor as very trying. The action soon brings Scott and Laura, a bright tourist pair whose vehicle gives way in a storm. Managed by locals at a full house inn named the Teeth and Jugular, they show up at Castle Duckula, hoping for sanctuary. Where Igor views quarry, Duckula views dollars, declaring what a splendid idea it would be to operate the castle as a hotel. This hasty enthusiasm to be a hotel manager provides the story's tension. Igor attempting to warp the events towards horror, while Duckula and Nanny fumble at hospitality. Igor lays out complicated traps, starting with a falling chandelier that Nanny is to cause by pressing the beak of a statue. She keeps messing up in a classic slapstick comedy, poking her own nose or hitting the wrong target, while Igor sighs in frustration. However, the guests don't notice and think it's a part of the castle's weird charm. I rather enjoy how the comedy operates on two levels here, Igor's elaborate plans unfolding into disaster, and the guests entirely misunderstanding every threat as lovable atmosphere. It's an ideal send-up of gothic horror inside out. The library scene is another gem. Duckula accepts with pride shelves stacked with foreboding books, demonology, the modern ghoul's handbook, and even vampirism in 3 easy stages. But he breezily assures his guests that it's all superstitious nonsense, mocking particularly vampires. It's a sly joke, undercutting both Igor's schemes and nodding to the audience. Igor's last trick, a trapdoor to a werewolf, is foiled once more by the incompetence of Nanny, and Scott flaunts his own weirdness in reciting pi to 15,000 decimal places. Eventually, rather than fear, Duckula is rewarded with approval. The couple describe their visit as wonderful and bring their entire family back for a holiday, to his dismay. This episode amusingly subverts the Gothic convention of guests at the castle by turning the visitor's experience into a pleasure. Igor's exasperation here is one of the best examples in the series of his duty coming into conflict with his master's comedic ignorance.
Wind the handle.
Oh, very good, Master Duckula.
Episode 13, Autoduck. Count Duckula's new escapade in Autoduck begins while he is viewing auto racing and fantasizing about how fast he could go if he was a motorist. This serenity is forever broken upon his arrival by Nanny going through a wall and smashing the TV. Duckula, who already has outstanding bills you still owe for that one, Igor reminds him about his TV, and states that they weren't paid either does without his viewing pleasure and runs into financial difficulties. Duckula devises a big plan. I am going to create a motor car, race it, and put Transylvania on the map with world-land speed record. He hopes to become famous, entice sightseers, and profit from their visits. I'll be rich, rich, rich. He even runs an ad in his Transylvanian Times newspaper, advertising his brave, daring, money-spurring enterprise, and that he is creating the globe's mightiest V-vehicle. His first automotive attempt is a flying duck mobile. When Duckula insists upon details about the engine, Igor says, "The Mark I, my lord, is hand-powered. It's also minus a steering wheel and was only wind tunnel tested by fanning with Igor's eyes, and bits fell off it then." Early tourists leave pronto, not impressed, saying they couldn't hang about forever. Igor, understandably unimpressed, recommends that they need a top-class racing engineer and spare parts supplier. Duckula tries again, this time using a giant 3-ton flywheel to go right through the sound barrier. Nanny helps but misunderstands Jack bringing back a sock. Alonzo Ruffles, the racing engineer, produces an engine pinched out of a cement mixer. Duckula's attempt to break the record is dependent upon a giant elastic band stretched to its limits and propelling the car forward at a blistering 750 miles per hour when a red handle is activated. Nanny predictably pulls the lever too early and the car goes backwards. Duckula groans, "You've destroyed my chances forever. I'll never lay eyes on my precious car again." Duckula thinks he has broken the sound barrier and declares, 750 miles an hour, I did it. But his triumph is dashed when he reads the Transylvanian Times headline that 2 men flying carousels have shattered a new world record in man-powered flight. Duckula is still poor, his aspirations crushed, a recurrent theme of his ephemeral stardom and fortune.
Yeah, I can see that.
We're cute and we're sweet, and you can cuddle us if you like.
Episode 14, The Vampire Strikes Back. This episode is pure parody gold. Duckula's latest obsession is collecting 15,000 tokens from Crunchy Munchie's cereal to claim the ultimate prize: supersonic X-ray goggles and a protective space helmet. He wants to be just like his hero, Tremendous Terran, hero of space. If that name isn't a send-up of Buck Rogers or Flash Gordon, I don't know what is. Nanny finds the last 2 tokens by sheer luck, and Duckula gets ready to send them. But before he can, a disaster hits, thanks to Nanny's powerful homemade sarsaparilla. You take one sip, and the whole castle blasts off into space by accident. Duckula, being the positive person he is, just shrugs and says, happens to Terran all the time. He even gives himself a new name, M. Daring Duckula. They narrowly avoid destruction in an asteroid storm when Nanny, floating outside, literally collides with an asteroid and saves them. Duckula, still role-playing, declares they must head to Mars to battle the dreaded Oids, space monsters. The joke? He mistakes cartoonish images of the Oids for more photos of his hero. Soon, an Oid ship attacks, but is fended off by none other than Tremendous Terran himself. Terran even rewards Duckula with the helmet and goggles before dropping the trio on Planet Cute. Sounds harmless? Think again. The planet is an overload of sickly sweetness, ruled by adorable Amy and overrun with cuddly bunnies. Igor is disgusted. Duckula is horrified. And the national dish, Scrubbius, basically sugar on sugar, pushes them over the edge. Worst of all, the inhabitants threaten to sprinkle them with happy dust, turning everything unbearably cute. Thankfully, Nanny's sarsaparilla doubles as rocket fuel, blasting the castle back to gloomy Transylvania. Duckula rejoices until Nanny cheerily starts cleaning away cobwebs, restoring the castle's signature chaos. The title is a cheeky riff on The Empire Strikes Back. It's also one of the few episodes where sci-fi completely replaces the usual gothic setting.
Oh, the sandwich. Sorry, I thought you meant the carpet.
I didn't order no carpet.
No, I know, madam, I meant...
Episode 15, Hard Luck Hotel. Count Duckula decides he's had enough of Igor's gloom and Nanny's chaos. What he wants is a luxury weekend getaway. Naturally, he ends up at the Hard Luck Hotel. And yes, the name is exactly what it sounds like. His assigned room is 1313, because of course it is, perched on the top floor. The elevator hasn't worked since the turn of the century. There's no bellboy. And when Duckula complains about being vegetarian, the receptionist sarcastically suggests he see a doctor. The show loved poking fun at Duckula's anti-vampire lifestyle. The room itself, completely empty. When Duckula protests, he meets Mr. Grinder, the hotel's idea of customer service. He literally eats the guests. Terrified, Duckula quickly pretends he's perfectly happy with his accommodations. Things get worse when he tries to check out, only to discover his Transylvanian drama's currency has crashed in value. He can't pay his bill, so he's forced into working it off. Cue a montage of Duckula as chef, chambermaid, bellboy, and dishwasher. He even has to serve disgusting meals and deal with impossible guests, including one who demands cocoa at 2:45 a.m. Duckula compares them to Nanny, which feels spot on. If that's not humiliating enough, the manager makes him headline the cabaret as the Great Duckaroony. His mind-reading act backfires, accidentally exposing Igor and Nanny hiding in the audience. The final twist? Duckula learns his currency has suddenly skyrocketed in value. He's rich again. But in typical Duckula fashion, he's already exchanged it all for jelly beans. Instantly broke, he's doomed to keep scrubbing dishes while Igor and Nanny, now flush with valuable money, relax as pampered hotel guests. Room 1313 and the cursed hotel setup are nods to classic haunted house and horror comedy tropes. The economic gag about worthless currency was surprisingly topical for 80s Britain.
Gosh, they're nice fellas. See, what did I tell you, Igor? Huh.
Episode 16, The Hunchbudgy of Notre Dame. Count Duckula, for some reason or another, ends up trading his own castle for the Eiffel Tower. Yep, only Duckula could pull that swap. Two scam artists, Gaston and Pierre, scam him into it, and to further add to the absurdity, Nanny steps in to assist by painting the Eiffel Tower pink, because clearly she had assumed Duckula owned the Eiffel Tower and wanted it prettier. Picture waking up in Paris and your house is gone, and a big pink Eiffel Tower takes its place. Duckula must be the most gullible vampire in history, yet that's part of his charm. Painting the Eiffel Tower isn't entirely outlandish. The tower actually was painted reddish-brown when it first went up. Duckula then concludes that the solution to his financial woes is to become an artist. He paints Notre Dame Cathedral and is positive it's going to bring him fortune. The scam artists spot a chance and pump him up, saying it's so great it'll take the place of some lesser Italian painting at the Louvre. Spoiler, they have the Mona Lisa in mind. So Duckula, Igor and Nanny stride into the Louvre to hang his masterpiece on the wall, while nonchalantly referring to the Mona Lisa as rubbish. Somewhere, Leonardo da Vinci is whirling in his grave. In fact, in 1911, the Mona Lisa went missing, and for 2 years nobody knew where it was. When Inspector Migrant, who has been examining the pink Eiffel Tower disaster, shows up and believes Nanny is responsible, things get more dire. During the commotion, Nanny finds a way to fire a cannon, which shoots directly into Notre Dame's bells. IA's the genius. Igor insists that the scam artists give him Duckula's castle titles in exchange for the artwork. After complying, the scammers are arrested for trying to take the Mona Lisa. Duckula's neck is constantly rescued by Igor's brain, to be honest. This is one of the few shows where the Louvre and Notre Dame are featured prominently in the plot, a fun Paris crossover in a Transylvanian cartoon. And with that, Duckula regains his castle, Nanny ruins the poor man's bells, and the gang returns home to Transylvania.
Also?
Yes, Nanny, the old book that's been What? Nanny, what did...
Episode 17, Dear Diary. Dear Diary is a humorous episode that beautifully encapsulates Count Duckula's incessant pursuit of fortune and fame, only to have his aspirations dashed comically. It opens with Duckula complaining about his dreary life in Transylvania and worrying about such things as ketchup spots on the rug and a shortage of broccoli for dinner. Igor, his long-suffering but devoted butler, watches this activity in grim silence, regretting his master's complete absence of vampiric sensibilities. While Igor longs after blood and fright, Duckula broods about cleanliness and greens, a reversal that informs a great deal of the programme's comedy. It all starts when Duckula finds his great-grandfather's diary holding up his bed, literally, for 100 years. Flipping through it, he's thrilled to read tales of peril and chutzpah, like a flashback in which his ancestor evades getting stuck on a stake carried by von Goosewing's great-uncle, posing as a camera. To Duckula, these tales are hot stuff, and he can imagine selling them to the press under his new glamorous alter ego, the amazing Ducko. This fantasy about stardom betrays his constant desire to transcend obscurity, even if this is at another's borrowed glory. At the same time, von Goosewing discovers his ancestor's diary and is motivated to carry on his family's mission. He builds a sharp wooden spike that is hidden within a camera and disguises himself as Fritz Alpenhorn, ace reporter. The entire setup points to a huge drama, but as is typical of Duckula, Goosewing vows retaliation another day after that assassination attempt fails miserably. I personally like how the series parallels Duckula and Goosewing's ancestors in the diaries, only to reveal both descendants botching their forebears' missions. It's a witty satire about legacies become farce comedy. The ultimate twist in this episode is doubly cruel to Duckula. When he submits his diary to the Transylvanian Morning Sun, the editor rejects it as outmoded and irrelevant. However, Igor's diary turns out to be a front-page sensation and makes him an unwilling celebrity. To rub salt in his wounds, his mother succeeds in becoming famous too, in the shape of her radio show, Diary of a Nanny. Duckula, who concocted the plan, turns out humiliated, broke, and upstaged by his own servants. Dear Diary operates on a number of levels, both literally calling upon the diaries of Duckula, Igor, and Nanny, but also parodying the diary genre per se, making subjective urgings unforeseen routes to stardom. One of the most obvious instances of Duckula as the loser of his own plots is in this episode.
Coachman? A gardener? A downstairs maid? A cook or two?
Episode 18, Rent a Butler. Rent a Butler begins with one of the series' trademark gags. Nanny appearing in mid-explanation coming through the ceiling that he forgot ceilings don't have doors. This comedic disaster serves an episode about Duckula's long-standing struggle to keep his household staff in line. Learning that his chambermaid has gone AWOL after taking the werewolf out for a walk, Duckula panics that he has only Igor and Nanny left. Half serious, he suggests replacing staff with dungeon prisoners, but his aristocratic sensibilities shortly lead him to a civilized solution. Duckula visits Mrs. Grab's employment agency, seeking replacements. But when he learns that his own servants are commodities, the roles are inverted. Despite the currency's generally useless reputation, he takes advantage of the scenario and leases out Igor and Nanny for a substantial weekly charge of 7,000 dramas for Igor and 6,500 as Nanny. This deft turn of events reveals Duckula's avarice as he forgoes comfort in favour of financial gain without admitting his true reliance on his employees. Alone in the castle, Duckula is quickly overwhelmed. He is dying of hunger and can't make his favourite veggie foods, such as broccoli sandwiches or spaghetti pie with custard. Chores around the house make his hands rough and red and reveal how out of place he is with the grim reality of housekeeping. For me personally, these scenes delight because they poke such perfect fun at aristocratic remove. Duckula is a self-proclaimed visionary, but falls apart at simple self-sufficiency. The farce intensifies further when socialite Mrs. Novo-Ree calls him out to dine. With no servants, Duckula creates a cousin, Lelia, from the deep south, and pretends to be Nellie to slip grub in his really big handbag. Rather than dine, though, he's sent right out to work as a servant, opening doors and retrieving coats. Irony is sweet. His effort to keep status brings him down to servile drudgery, a repeat of his situation at the castle. More chaos ensues when Igor, Nanny, and Baron von Goosewing, masquerading as a vacuum salesman, appear, creating a mix-up of false identities and hapless plots. Mrs. Novo-Ree, out of control, ejects everyone. Finally, Duckula, still in costume foams at the bit outside his own castle, in a fit because he never had the dessert. Its title parodies employment agency style of the 1980s, while mocking aristocratic use of servants. Its ultimate joke, a red stain spreading across Lelia's snowy gown, is a canny visual send-up of Southern Gothic melodrama.
Slovenia, sir.
Oh, good. What? You mean you...
Episode 19, Jungle Duck. Jungle Duck is a parody romp about a jungle that integrates Duckula's insatiable greed with a sardonic send-up of pulp tales of adventure. It begins as encyclopedist salesmen come knocking on Castle Duckula's door. Duckula dismisses his sales pitch, but Igor snaps up the gargantuan 24-volume Encyclopedia Transylvania. Irritated initially at this useless expenditure at first, Duckula reverses his opinion immediately upon discovering an entry about a lost temple of Barney that is full of untold riches. His greed is activated immediately, foreshadowing another disastrous treasure hunt. Employing a castle teleportation ability, Duckula transfers it to darkest Africa and drags Igor and Nanny along on a mission. With a compass, a map, and a machete, Duckula sets out to hack our way through thick and recalcitrant jungle vegetation, even citing encyclopedia trivia, such as the little-known fact that the elephant is the only animal in the animal kingdom to possess 4 knees. These nugatory facts ridicule Duckula's habit of posturing to be informative while being completely lost. While on a mission, they come across Peter, a man brought up by awfully nice apes, presumably a parody of Tarzan. Instead of sage heroic advice, Peter gives hilariously confusing directions that leave them going round in circles. They also come across the Bizarro Major and Commodore suffering jungle fever, who assume the trio to be long-lost family. I personally find these diversions amusing, because they point up Duckula's brilliance at spoiling action tropes. The helpers, who could be intended to smooth out the mission, only create obstacles. They finally arrive at the temple, which inconveniently looks exactly like Castle Duckula itself. They find a collection of Ming vases therein, reportedly holding a treasure map. But since Nanny was predictably herself, having smashed a vase while dusting and having glued it back inappropriately, they find this map garbled. It leads them on a wild goose chase. Predictably, they discover no treasure, but Duckula foaming at his friends, bemoaning how he is cursed with fools as friends. The episode spoofs the 1980s craze for jungle adventure films, especially Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Peter is a bumbling Tarzan parody, further mocking pulp heroes. The episode also reinforces one of the show's core running gags. Duckula's greed sets him on grand quests, but the outcome is always the same failure, humiliations, and a return to square one.
Don't worry, Nanny. Accidents will happen, and after all, it's only the second best teapot.
Episode 20, Mobile Home. It begins with a prosaic mishap. Nanny inadvertently shatters Count Duckula's second best teapot. This minor home crisis triggers much greater consequences when a builder is called to Castle Duckula. Inspecting the property, he dolefully diagnoses the estate as structurally in disastrous decline, citing wet rot, weakened arches, and a west wing on the point of collapse. Taking advantage of Duckula's noble pride and gullibility, the builder makes him an offer of a special offer to perform the huge renovation work for nothing at all, presenting it as a precious privilege. The contractor's unorthodox techniques quickly turn out to be disastrous. Rather than fix the building, he has Castle Duckula torn down piece by piece. Each item is stamped and numbered and given a postal address before it is shipped off through a ridiculously convoluted bicycle chain distribution system. The upshot is bizarre. Castle Duckula literally disappears from its Transylvanian mountaintop, mailed overseas in pieces. Duckula's astonishment is compounded as he finds that one of the cornerstones has been inscribed to Mr. and Mrs. Tarquin Paintbrush of Idalina, USA. The ominous reality begins to dawn. The castle has been exported overseas. And to make matters worse, Nanny's failure to count higher than 5 disrupts the numbering system. She keeps recycling the sequence, producing thousands of stones with the same number. This mistake means that when the castle is reassembled in America, it is reassembled incorrectly, with nonsensical architectural quirks, a basement attic in the wrong place, a damp proofing in the wrong place, and an outside door halfway up the wall. With Mr. Paintbrush owing to arrive at his new property in half an hour, Duckula, Igor and Nanny rush to create an escape strategy from the absurd reconstruction. Their attempts at flight only contribute to the farce. Nanny confuses the roadside for the Rockies, and attempts at hitchhiking are unsuccessful. The builders, meanwhile, abandon their frenzied project, leaving the 3 stranded in a castle with only one door that is precariously located near the roof. The episode works as a scathing parody of incompetence and bureaucracy, with the ongoing series gag of Duckula's over-the-top aristocratic pretensions clashing against absurd bad luck.
Oh, you enjoyed it that much? Oh. And what about you, Igor?
Episode 21, A Fright at the Opera. The show transports Count Duckula, Igor, and Nanny to the chic Parisian opera house for an evening of high culture. The trip is quickly disrupted, though, by the presence of the malevolent phantom of the opera, a scorned composer who lives in the sewers under the opera house after years of derision his music has received. The Phantom's evil plot is soon revealed. He has installed a bomb in the opera organ, set to go off the instant the soprano hits a high C, reducing musical virtuosity to a literal life and death issue. As Duckula worries, Igor coincidentally runs into a former acquaintance, Cruel, who is now working for the Phantom. Former classmates in dungeons and torture studies in 33, Cruel informs Igor of his master's devilish plans so sinister they cause his blood run cold. The Phantom's scheme is to kidnap the opera singer Alira in a simulated blackout and compel her to sing his works in his sewer complex. Duckula, frightened and resentful, groans that he wishes he were half as wicked as his father and grandfather. The kidnapping falls apart in disarray. When Alira will not perform the Phantom's piece, desperation compels him to find another voice. To the horror of all, Nanny steps forward. Blithely unaware of peril, she sings the crucial high C, not only rescuing the day, but also defusing the bomb. Her sheer noise, as always, turns out to be heroically fortuitous. The episode satirizes the Phantom of the opera legend by increasingly making the villain absurd. Duckula and his friends are brought to a captive audience status for Nanny's thundering performance, as the Phantom, humiliated and vanquished, vows to leave Paris for Nashville as the place of musical stardom. The adventure ends on this comedic turn. Nanny, enjoying her talent of song, blissfully oblivious she has again prevented catastrophe.
Milk!
Episode 22, Dr. Goosewing and Mr. Duck. We begin at Castle Duckula, where our dear veggie vampire is again proving how not vampire-like he really is. Instead of lurking in the dark or prowling villagers, Duckula is downward-facing and smooching over an accident of ketchup on his robes. Barely the blood-curdling Prince of Darkness one might have hoped. Up in the air, Von Goosewing is zipping about in his always clumsy airship, rubbing his hands together with excitement. Tonight, he promises himself, will be the night he once and for all is rid of Count Duckula and his so-called evil ways. Spoiler. Things, as they so often do, don't exactly work out as planned. Due to Nanny's reliably morning malfunctioning behaviour, Duckula mistakenly consumes muesli as opposed to his usual non-blood-stained breakfast. This absurd confusion sets the whole story in motion. In a flash, something unusual happens. Duckula begins talking and behaving like a real vampire. The cereal has apparently taken hold, making him completely opposite his usual goofy self. The name of this episode is a nod to the classic Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde story, and you can quite literally see the parody here. Duckula's dark side turns out to be quite nice. Igor's beside himself. At last, he believes, his master has accepted his true darker nature. He encourages Duckula to mingle with the villagers, scheduled for a proper old-fashioned neck-biting session. But instead of terrorizing the town, Duckula embarks on a pathetic niceness rampage. He cuddles babies, rescues kittens from trees, and helps little old ladies across the street. The villagers scream in confusion. Goosewing is confused, and Igor is shocked. Think about it. A vampire whose bad side is the ultimate good guy. This running joke is never resolved, and the said good potion that caused Duckula to transform is left a mystery. Sniffing victory, Goosewing swoops in, Heinrich in tow, hell-bent on driving a stake, and yes, Goosewing probably had both the wood and the meat, varieties handy, through Duckula's heart. Even Igor chimes in for a moment, convinced that this good spell must be irreversible and therefore wonderful. One of the few times in the series, Igor and Goosewing are on the same side. Of course, Nanny eventually bursts in, scolding Goosewing and Igor. Duckula's breaks under the interruption, and he is restored to his normal state. Enraged and embarrassed, he promises never again to perform anything good. The episode ends on a cheeky one. Goosewing once more fails, Duckula is unaffected, and Nanny unknowingly shows she might be the strongest character of all. Honestly, if Goosewing ever succeeded, Nanny would still be the true final boss.
Department?
No, mate, that's information. They'll tell you where to go.
Sheesh.
Episode 23, Town Hall Terrors. The tale opens on a grimy, rainy Tuesday in Transylvania, where peasants from the area converge to talk about how their village is doing. Hoping to claim the prestigious Prettiest Village in Transylvania title, they decide that their largest challenge is Castle Duckula, a stinky old ruin that stands in the way of their victory. To fix things, the villagers hold a straw drawing, and 2 unlucky peasants are dispatched to appeal directly to Count Duckula himself. At the castle, Duckula is moping around in boredom, having had enough unleashing for one night. When the peasants get there, bad luck just follows them along. One of them is hurt, and Nanny prescribes an aspirin as a remedy for a broken skull, right on cue with her wrong-headed nursing. The peasants beseech Duckula to update the castle, and while he at first scoffs at the suggestion, he soon finds himself caught up in it. Redoubling his energy, Duckula imagines a modern house with push-button gadgets, sunken walkways, deep carpets, and plastic flowers. The only snag is finance. Nanny, in her typical bewilderment, proposes that they make an application for a grant, misinterpreting it as a family connection, whereas Igor recoils at the shame of a Duckula begging for money. However, the 3 of them head for the town hall to make their application. The following is a ridiculous bureaucratic adventure. In trying to locate the right department, they are bounced from department to department such as water, sports and recreation, gardening and demolition. Duckula gets dangerously close to signing away his soul to spend the remainder of his days emptying trash cans all across Transylvania, only to have Igor catch sight of the damning small print in time. Eventually they stumble into the elusive Grants for Crumbling Castles department. Yet, just as progress seems possible, they discover their castle has been clamped for illegal parking, incurring a fine that derails their efforts entirely. The episode ends in signature absurdity, with Duckula, Igor and Nanny inadvertently attending a town hall hearing on an extension project for the railways. Duckula, resigned to his destiny, complains about the lack of a buffet car on the Pennsylvania Express, tidily wrapping up the story with his signature combination of vanity and frustration.
You know self-respect. Aren't you the monarchs of the jungle?
Episode 24, Sawdust Ring. The first scene of the program shows complete hopelessness. A circus owner, Alberto Stratella, bemoans the fact that his life and business are ruined, having been deserted by all his employees. When Duckula asks him what the problem is, the owner refers to him as Mama, so Nanny breaks it down in her characteristically uncomplicated way that the peoples have walk out. Taking advantage of the moment, Duckula declares his genius plan, the show must go on, and himself, Igor and Nanny will form the circus. Igor, exhausted after 724 years of loyal service, silently wishes for early retirement and a cozy shop, but Duckula's endless energy trumps any idea of holding back. Stratella observes Nanny's unorthodox assistance when her pitching effort for the circus tent ends in flattened houses, causing him to declare her a terrible pitcher and preventing her from pitching tents anymore. The 3 get into a succession of haphazard acts. Duckula becomes Jock Ori, globe-trotting juggler, with Nanny as his lovely assistant, Nanita. Naturally enough, Duckula keeps getting hit by the balls he juggles, showing up the trio to be inadequate professionals. Igor becomes Prince Igor, with the monarchs of the jungle, ferocious beasts he is trained to command, but in a surreal flourish tries to milk them instead. Their most daring performance, a trapeze act, very soon disintegrates into chaos. Duckula crashes beautifully, causing a ruckus aptly termed, sounds like they're bringing the house down. Charlie and Morris, disgruntled past performers keenly expecting the trio to fail, yank out the tent pegs, literally bringing the tent down and guaranteeing complete anarchy. Finally, Stratella, completely frustrated, discharges all of the employees, stating, "Never darken my sawdusts again." Duckula, with a lump in his throat, laments that the ringmaster never even said goodbye. Igor provides a darkly comedic twist, pointing out that the werewolf has a lump in his throat as well, cynically suggesting that the lack of farewell left more than emotional disappointment. This episode is typical of the series' signature blend of physical slapstick, surreal character interaction, and black humour, with Duckula's high-flown ambitions inevitably falling short against reality.
It is cotton candy. Ugh, I just remembered I hate cotton candy.
Episode 25, Duck and the Broccoli Stalk. Duck and the Broccoli Stalk starts with Count Duckula, Igor, and Nanny sitting down for a session of telling tales. Duckula is captivated by the idea of a story featuring Fifi Faux Fum, a giant, and gold eggs, and is immediately thinking about how he would be Dula, the giant slayer, or the duck with the gold legs, living in the limelight and riches. Nanny, ever the skeptic, grapples with the idea of a giant beanstalk and asks it to exist at all, adding her trademark comedic skepticism. The fantasy of the story is immediately juxtaposed with the real world when Duckula sees what he thinks is Dr. von Goosewing hiding in the garden. Goosewing, as usual, is planning something, having sprayed Duckula's broccoli plant with a high-growth fertilizer concoction. The broccoli goes into a phenomenal growth spurt, growing to the size of a gigantic stalk, reaching a castle in the sky, well positioning Duckula for his next adventure. Despite Igor's cautious protests and somber allusions to past mistakes, Duckula is ecstatic and insists on flying the castle to the lofty destination. When they arrive, the three of them face what they think is a gigantic. The giant, though, is seen to be a short person with a gigantic voice and heavy steps, who has his mother, Mrs. Jean, at his side, both being engrossed in giant slaying and egg poaching. Duckula's panic and comedy are fueled by this misunderstanding. Their attempted escape is to tie themselves onto a rope, with Nanny tasked with lowering them down slowly back onto the ground. Naturally, when Dr. von Goosewing reappears with his vampire blaster and intends to murder Duckula, the plan gets worse. Audiences chuckle at the absurdity of Duckula's mistakes as he narrowly escapes disaster throughout a string of frantic near misses. This episode is a classic example of the series' ongoing theme of Duckula's inflated fantasies bumping into reality, coupled with Nanny's well-intentioned but disaster-prone intervention. The combination of fairy tale spoof and slapstick makes it a highlight. The show spoofs traditional fairy tales, such as Jack and the Beanstalk, with Duckula laughingly cast both as hero and victim, and the giant's miniature size providing a subtle turn on expectations.
We'll add a glass of blood and we'll drink a toast to the family.
Blood? Me? You gotta be...
Episode 26, A Family Reunion. A family reunion begins in the midst of the usual castle Duckula chaos, but this time the screams are due to a mysterious, evil and frightful creature stirring in the dark depths. Count Duckula is shortly after sent a letter informing him of a family reunion, an infrequent event taking place once every 100 years on All Hallows' Eve. Signed by his loving Uncle Vlad, the letter indicates that Duckula's ancestral mansion will be the site of this historic, evil and fishy event on the 31st. Duckula, as expected, is appalled. A vegetarian and pacifist by nature, he will not accommodate his blood-sucking relatives, declaring, "No family reunion. Not in my castle. There isn't." Igor, on the other hand, is looking forward to the celebrations, hoping for a festival of evil doing and wickedness, with blood-tasting games and village maiden recruitment, much to Duckula's horror. Time is running out for Duckula. With the relatives' arrival only one day away, Igor forewarns that the relatives will already be on their way. The Count is compelled to disguise himself as a classic vampire, surviving a hilariously charged scene where he feigns appreciation of a glass of Bulgarian office temp blood, all while surviving the castle of bloodlusting fiends. Rounding out the confusion, Dr. von Goosewing shows up intent on exterminating Duckula and his vampire clan. Bearing a wide beam, multiple exterminator, and essence of garlic spray, Goosewing tries his customary stake and hammer tactics. Nanny, unaware of impending doom, adds to the trouble when a piano falls from her fingers. Duckula next develops a scheme, impersonating a servant while casting Igor as the Count, though Nanny's confusion is close to derailing the plan. At last, Igor outwits the reunion by 7 days, making relatives believe that Duckula has a hereditary infirmity. The episode ends with the all-too-familiar echo of screams, a witty and ominous reminder of the mayhem that Duckula's noble way of life always incites. The vampire aristocrat Duckula is consistently outwitted by circumstance, family, and Nanny's harmless mistakes in this episode, which demonstrates the show's grasp of sarcasm. Duckula's pacifist inclinations and tradition clash in a hilarious and endearing way. The episode's title craftingly invokes traditional Gothic conventions of vampire heritage and All Hallows' Eve ceremonies, while the concept of a once-in-a-century family reunion parodies both aristocratic tradition and horror conventions.
Something mighty strange about this place.
Season 2, 1989 to 1990. Episode 1, Ghostly Gold. So we see the Count sulking around Castle Duckula, which is very Duckula-like, because he thinks life is boring and nothing exciting ever occurs. When he's bored, he acts very dramatic and believes he's meant for something far more amazing. Then, when Nanny happens to come on a newspaper item about a gold rush in the Yukon, his big chance suddenly appears. Duckula's mind naturally goes crazy when she sees the headline of becoming an instant billionaire and enormous wealth. His eyes brighten as if he had just won a fortune at the casino when he hears the word gold. He makes the quick decision that they will go prospecting, already imagining how he will fire Igor and Nanny as soon as he has a lot of money. He completely abandons loyalty the moment greed takes over, which is such a Duckula thing to do. They are taken to the Yukon by the castle, but rather of making a lot of money, they end up right in the heart of a tremendous blizzard. They stumble into what appears to be a bustling prospecting town, completely cold and feeling rough. It's a little strange though, because the place has a really postcard-like atmosphere, complete with snowy cabins and festive decorations. Duckula notices something strange while relaxing in a seedy saloon. The residents don't have reflections. A little unsettling, isn't it? However, he is too preoccupied with earning money to pay any attention. They encounter Mad McGrow, a shabby prospector who is thrashing around a map to a hidden gold mine. Furthermore, Duckula blatantly displays his self-centeredness by trading Igor and Nanny to McGrow in order to obtain the map. Like, really? Giving up his alleged pals in favour of a chance at treasure is one of his biggest betrayals. Duckula rushes over to the mine, only to find out the nasty surprise. That newspaper Nanny found is from September 14th, 1896. Igor just casually says that the whole town is filled with ghosts, all long gone since the original gold rush. Even worse, all the gold Duckula dug up is just some worthless yellow rocks. His dreams of getting rich disappear faster than they showed up. Feeling defeated, the three of them head back to Castle Duckula, only for Nanny to slam the door so hard that the whole castle crumbles around them. So much for that millionaire dream. This episode is a hilarious take on ghost towns, blending classic Western vibes with some supernatural comedy. It truly stands out because of the entire Yukon setting and the ghost prospector element. Fun fact, Duckula completely betrays Igor and Nanny in one of the earliest episodes of Ghostly Gold, which makes the ending more poignant and rewarding. Additionally, it's a clever parody of those vintage gold rush tales, demonstrating how Duckula is always completely blinded by avarice.
It's time to say goodbye.
Yes, goodbye. It's so nice to meet you.
Episode 2, Ducknapped. This features Duckula receiving a ransom note stating he has been kidnapped and asking for 50,000 dramas to return him unharmed. For a moment, he freaks out, then remembers he's literally still inside the castle. It's such a preposterous premise, yet Nanny is totally taken in, descending into madness and wailing over her ducky boos. Igor, as ever, is taking it all too seriously and goes off to investigate. In the meantime, we encounter the perpetrators. Two hapless criminals, Denzel and Cuff. They actually sent out the ransom note before they so much as kidnapped Duckula. Amateur criminals indeed. Duckula naturally takes it upon himself to act as detective and imagines himself to be Count Duckula, super sleuth. He discovers a clue on the note. It has been written on headed notepaper from Rosebud Cottage, Vlad Street, Duckyville. Off he goes, bent on solving the case. Meanwhile, the thieves do happen to collect the ransom due to sheer luck, and then panic because they realize that they never kidnapped Duckula in the first place. They figure the best way to correct their mistake is to go and grab him anyway. And in all honesty, their timing could not be worse, as Duckula happens to arrive at Rosebud Cottage while they are freaking out. They re-kidnap him, this time properly, but his awful banjo playing makes them so crazy that they just release him. I'd have thrown him off the moment he put his hands on that banjo if I were them. The twist? By the time Duckula returns home, Nanny has already squandered the ransom funds on a new dress. Typical Nanny.
By the side of our luxurious swimming pool, takes the night away enough.
Episode 3, The Lost Valley. Bored with his castle again, Duckula drags Igor and Nanny to the cinema. They watch this adventure film called The Lost Valley, full of dinosaurs and a mythical diamond mountain. Duckula is instantly hooked. Igor tries to remind him it's just fiction, but Duckula doesn't care. He decides they're going to find the real Lost Valley. Honestly, he never listens to Igor's logic, and that's why they always end up in trouble. They employ the castle teleporting ability and find themselves in the middle of the Lost Valley. But there's a twist here. It's not the real thing, just the genuine film set. All the scenery is cardboard and imitation. This fails to discourage Nanny from knocking out a dinosaur prop by mistake, which surprises the locals. They immediately think Duckula and the others are gods. Duckula, never one to miss an opportunity to boast, proclaims himself to be Yellow Nose and insists that they bring him to the Diamond Mountain. The villagers are perplexed, for in their opinion, diamonds and colourless stones are useless. Duckula attempts to impress them with magic tricks to demonstrate his divine nature, but Nanny continues to inadvertently disclose the secrets behind the tricks. The entire performance begins to disintegrate around him, and just as things reach maximum chaos, the film crew carelessly says, "End of the film," which shuts down their entire escapade. Because the castle came down on set, they have to wait until the next evening's screening of The Lost Valley before returning home. Think being trapped in cardboard land until movie night arrives.
This one! Again 9!
Episode 4, The Incredible Shrinking Duck. Our favourite vampire hunter, Dr. von Goosewing, is back with another crazy plan. This time, he invents a Mark 7 shrinking and miniaturizing ray to finally defeat Duckula. The episode begins with bizarre weather. It's snowing in July, and Duckula is sulking in the kitchen trying to cook. He argues with Igor about their vampire lineage and upsets Nanny, which sets the tone for the rest of the episode. Chaos is brewing. Goosewing can shrink Castle Duckula to toy size, and then, being the klutz he is, he drops it. Castle Duckula comes close to being sold to a street vendor as a novelty item, until Duckula happens upon it and purchases all of the miniature castles to ensure that he reclaims the real one. Buying his own house is just too ironic. The gang sees that they, too, have shrunk within the castle and are trapped within a bubble that Goosewing is carrying. Nanny, being destructive by nature, accidentally destroys something, and they break free with her sling acting as a parachute. It's imaginative, but also implausible. Goosewing, enraged, shrinks himself to pursue them, only to lose his size advantage altogether. And naturally, his machine has a reverse gear, which ultimately returns the castle and a sandwich he miniaturized earlier to its normal size. There's a close call when Igor cautions that if they are outside the castle when it expands again, they'll be squashed to a jelly. They manage to get in just in time, and Goosewing is left seething once more.
Why should I pretend that I'm a sausage? Not a sausage,
Episode 5, High Duck. The The episode begins with Count Duckula itching to escape the dark, dismal, dreary routine of life at Castle Duckula. Resolute on doing so, he, Igor and Nanny fly out in their flying castle, discreetly camouflaged as a car bound for the airport. Igor's infamous bad driving is revelled in throughout their journey, though on this occasion, Nanny is not held responsible for the mayhem. En route, Nanny gapes in wonder at the vision of a great big airplane, retaining her childlike innocence and awkward awe. Dr. von Goosewing, Duckula's continually persistent vampire-hunting foe, also appears at the airport. He makes a fleeting appearance on a plane, noting that Castle Duckula is visible from the starboard side, before the aircraft vanishes into cloud cover. At the airport, Duckula's party is subject to a surprise delay created by two small-time crooks, Gaston and Pierre, who try to rob a plane on the runway. Their scheme is unsuccessful, and the duo promptly check in on the same Transylvania Airlines flight, TVA 3987 to Tunis, where their bags are comically marked as overweight. In a typically slapstick moment, Nanny ends up stuck on the baggage loading bay, helplessly declaring, "I'm going round again," as she is carried along with the conveyor. Having boarded, Captain Sloane and Copney are presented as the crew. Halfway through flight, Gaston attempts to hijack the aircraft using a dummy water pistol, but his demands fail since he cannot make himself heard. Duckula, seeing an opportunity for glory and fame, springs into action. Playing up his own role, he portrays himself as a brave, wonderful, courageous, hunky, adorable hero, and in the chaos that ensues, would-be hijackers are quickly overpowered.
Boy, have I ever got some news!
Episode 6, Primetime Duck. A flamboyant TV crew from Transylvanian television arrives at Castle Duckula, blinding the castle with brilliant floodlights, signalling the start of the action. Duckula, desperate for attention, believes this is his big break right away. He's prepared to offer the world a song, a smile, a dance, and even something he refers to as happy webs. He launches into a performance, only the camera isn't rolling. Embarrassment personified. As it turns out, the cast isn't there to turn Duckula into a star. They're shooting a serious documentary series titled Great Castles of the World. When they see Duckula, they conclude he's completely wrong for playing Count Duckula. Too short, not distinguished enough, essentially, not leading man material. Instead, they play Igor the Count and Nanny the Countess, and dub her with the comedic stage name Amnesia. Unfortunate Duckula gets relegated to playing servant, in particular, the cook. Things only go downhill from here for Duckula's embarrassment. The crew offloads all of their ridiculous food demands on him, and he has no clue what to do with them. Igor, who initially tried to resist the entire Count bit, now loves it. He prances about like a king, charming all. Nanny, in her Countess Amnesia persona, is happy as can be, waving around her antique cooking show trophy like it's evidence of nobility. Duckula, however, is reduced to playing several servant positions: cook, maid, Trixie, footman, Joseph, and even gardener, Klaus. He's spread too thin, frantically dashing about trying to accomplish the impossible, like preparing cabbage clever. The entire show turns out to be about Igor and Nanny, who are hogging the limelight. Come the finale, they're so deep in character that they formally dismiss all their inept servants, Duckula himself included. The poor chap is literally locked out of his own castle, bellowing at the indignity. Fame did not merely slip away from him, it ran him out of the door. This episode is one of the best parodies of TV culture throughout the entire series. It makes fun of how documentary history shows can be fakey nonsense. And it's also one of the only times Igor and Nanny get to be spotlight stars rather than background players. Duckula, on the other hand, has his worst nightmare, becoming a side character in his own life.
That's what we're looking for.
No, Nanny, stay where you are.
Episode 7, Blood-Sucking Fruit Bats of the Lower Amazon. Igor again comes up with a plan to revert Count Duckula back to his original vampire form. This time, he recruits Fang, an expertly trained Amazonian bloodfruit bat whose venom would awaken the bloodlust of Duckula. The plot falls apart in a moment when Nanny spoils Fang on chalky bickies, which she treats like a kitten rather than a hunter. Fang loses all edge, and Igor is left fuming, not willing to give up. Igor concludes that they have to get the fabled bats of the Amazon in person. He fools Duckula into flying the castle to the other side of the globe, and it crashes in a swamp. They encounter Professor Bonbon, a wacky scientist who is willing to take them to the cave of Takapaka, which is rumoured to contain millions of bloodfruit bats. The three are ambushed by a local tribe whose tongue-twisting name is Wana Panamana Nana Tanahana on their way to the cave. The tribe intends to roast them for a feast, but they are saved by a ridiculous misunderstanding. Nani is impersonated as royalty and anointed Queen Nani, the first of 7 Mosian. Attempting to protect her friends, she commands the warriors to throw the spears, but they only drop them. Lastly, they arrive at the cave. Igor thinks his victory is finally here, with hordes of bats in the sky, but Nani makes the same mistake. She gives them chalky bickies, making 500,000 ferocious beasts into harmless, fluffy kittens. Igor's dreams of bringing back Duckula's vampirism are utterly ruined again. The escapade concludes with the three returning to Transylvania. Duckula, thrilled beyond words, proclaims he never wishes to lay eyes on another bat, biscuit, or jungle queen again. Igor is seething with failure, and Nani is still unaware of the mayhem she created. This episode exhibits the show's constant pattern. Igor plots, Nani ruins it, and Duckula arrives home just as he began. Not a vampire, but an oddball vegetarian count.
You mean imposter?
Yeah?
Episode 8, The Count and the Pauper. Duckula begins this one in top boredom gear, complaining about how boring vampire existence is. All the rituals, the spooky chores, tedious, repeated, meaningless, as he describes it. What he'd much prefer to be is a common farm duck, eking out an existence on a small plot of ground. At the same time, on Maggot's farm, there is a peasant duck called Sid Quack, who thinks of something quite different. He's tired of slopping around in muck and would like to live in style, with wealth and a mansion. You can probably work out where this is leading. The two ducks literally bump into each other, and after a quick chat, they decide to swap lives. At first, Duckula thinks he's scored the dream of fresh air, farm life, and no vampire duties. But reality hits fast. He's stuck doing endless chores, dodging beatings from Farmer Stink, and dealing with Granny Ricky. Turns out, farm life isn't all it's cracked up to be, especially when you're used to lazy castle living. In the meantime, Sid Quack enjoys himself to his heart's content in Castle Duckula. He gobbles red meat and blood pudding, at last living the fat duck fantasy. Igor is delighted. Finally, the Count is acting like a good vampire, and Nani is too dazed to realise the switch. She simply believes Duckula's been learning electrocution lesson because of his new manner of speaking. Duckula finally can't stand farm life any longer and slips back through a hidden doorway into the castle. But when Nani spots him, she believes that he is an imposter, or worse, some sort of defroster. A chaotic battle ensues, and Duckula is sent crashing to the ground on the head. Igor matter-of-factly tells him that the bump has restored him to normal, erasing all memory of the switch. Back to square one, Duckula stuck with the life he despises, and Sid on his ear. One of the most overt references to Mark Twain's The Prince and the Pauper. Except for royalty and peasants, it's a bored veggie vampire versus a money-grabbing farm duck. Episode 9, Arctic Circles. In the elevated foothills of Transylvania, where Count Duckula is indulging in a very unvampiric activity, enjoying a raspberry ice lolly, Igor is observing with misplaced pride, and he applauds Duckula's good technique, even advising him to try a village maiden on a stick instead. Duckula shudders at the idea, calling it disgusting. Igor, who laments that the Count will not accept vampirism, sighs that without a death a week, life has lost its meaning, to which Duckula responds with a wisecrack that if such a dark stipulation were placed, Igor would be the first to go. Resolute in his rejection of bloodthirst, Duckula instead announces his sole genuine desire, ice cream. This fanciful urge drives Duckula, Igor, and Nani on an adventure to the Arctic Circle. Adversing the snowy landscape, Duckula contemplates pitching camp and charging Igor with keeping an eye out for polar bears. Their ramblings soon land them at a majestic igloo, where they are met by Jives, a gracious penguin butler to Colonel Willoughby. Jives gives Duckula the master bedroom, but demotes Igor and Nanny to the tradesman's entrance. Ever clueless, Nanny suggests retrimming the igloo's entrance in crushed lilac. Enchanted with this new setup, Duckula unceremoniously dismisses Igor, proclaiming he has had things his own way for far too long. To Igor's shock, Jives takes his place as Butler, reducing the loyal servant to despair at being let go after 7.5 centuries of faithful service, displaced by a penguin. Duckula's zeal soon turns sour when Jives and his penguin family demand a diet made up entirely of seaweed. Meanwhile, Dr. von Goosewing enters in his usual style, this time on a hot air balloon, which Igor confuses with a Christmas pudding. The hapless vampire hunter is keen to zap Duckula, but is confused by having so many penguins around, grumbling about his intention to miss the duck and zap the penguin. More chaos ensues when Nanny enters a wardrobe full of fur coats, blissfully thinking she has discovered a nice hiding space. The misconception hits its highest point with the re-emergence of Colonel Willoughby, the igloo's rightful owner. Bankrupt and unable to meet his staff payments, Willoughby confesses his penguin workers have never been paid, causing Jives to walk out there and then. Left to his new staff, Duckula is confronted by an angry horde of penguins, a flustered Goosewing, and an angry Igor. Realizing his error, Duckula re-employs Igor, confessing his irreplaceable loyalty. The trio quickly flees the Arctic, with Duckula promising never again to lay eyes on snow. Episode 11, Who Done It? There is nothing that gives Duckula a thrill more than the prospect of easy money, and Who Done It capitalizes on his greed nicely. The entire escapade begins when he reads about the passing of his great-great-uncle, the 7th Duke of Marlborough, in a letter. Duckula hardly glosses over the dismal news before his mind is seemingly hijacked by its own fantasies, already thinking of gems, mansions, bottomless piles of money. Essentially the sort of wealth that would enable him to finally get rid of Igor and Nanny for good. Full of seemingly flimsy notions, he hastens both of them to Henheim Palace for the reading of the will. This isn't the direct inheritance Duckula was expecting another time. At the ceremony, the sly lawyer Mr. Snatchit produces a stunning surprise. The Duke's inheritance shall not fall to a blood relative, but to whoever figures out who killed him. Roll out the thunder and foreboding organ music. Before anyone can flee, the palace doors close and lock behind them, holding everyone captive inside. For since the butler Crouch alone has the only keys, suspicion turns inwards at once. The killer must be among them. Duckula, who never hesitates to blow his own trumpet, recognizes this as his opportunity to emerge as a great detective. He dreams of discovering a murder weapon with fingerprints all over it, which will bring him fame and fortune. The punchline, naturally, is that Nanny instantly comes out with a cleaver covered in her own prints all over the blade. For a good 30 seconds, Duckula even manages to delude himself that Nanny has got to be the murderer until he loses faith in his own theory. The remainder of the investigation is farce through and through. Duckula fumbles at interviews, botches the names of esteemed visitors such as Mr. Willoughby Stain, and even incriminates himself at one point because he can't remember where he was on the 17th. The denouement comes in the guise of a mock trial, with Igor playing his defense attorney and Nanny appearing as a witness so untrustworthy that she makes things go from bad to worse. Just when Duckula appears to be a goner, the unthinkable occurs. The Duke enters the room alive and unscathed. The deception is that the murder was a setup, a makeshift piecing together of bits of outdated detective fiction to discover who among the partygoers could end up a murderer. Nobody is guilty, and Duckula's dreams of inheritance disappear in an instant. This episode is an overt spoof of Agatha Christie-type murder mysteries, featuring a locked room scenario, false blame, and a cliffhanger reveal. It's also distinctive because Duckula is both detective and suspect, a dual position which allows the show to satirize the whole genre while mocking his ineptitude. Enthusiasts usually mention this as one of the best written Season 2 episodes.
What is it, Nanny?
That poor fellow, look! Someone's gone and tied him up in knots!
Episode 12. No Yaks Please, We're Tibetan. Count Duckula, Igor, and Nanny walks through an inhospitable range of snow-covered mountains, where Duckula, perpetually bored, keeps himself entertained by yodeling. His energetic efforts at mountaineering bravado draw little excitement from Igor, who wonders at the sense in undertaking such a dangerous adventure. Duckula, though, brushes aside his doubts with overacted bravado, claiming that we intrepid mountaineers laugh in the face of danger, scoff at hardship, and sneer at adversity. Their good-natured repartee is brought short by an unexpected blizzard, compelling the party to hastily burrow into the snow for cover. Even in the life-or-death situation, Duckula makes wisecracks about the absence of hotels or inns in the Himalayas, highlighting his constant need for comfort in the most inappropriate settings. During the storm, the group comes across a Yeti, the legendary abominable snowman. Nanny, as usual, is mistaken and takes the frightening creature for a regular snowman and dusts snow off its face. To Duckula's surprise, the beast instantly vanishes, and he names the location a Yeti Freeze Zone, a joke he proclaims with smug self-satisfaction. Later, however, the three are distracted by stories of a giant emerald buried at the top of Mount Dakapana, guarded by the Yeti itself. Characteristically, greed gets the better of Duckula, and he insists they will find the treasure, dismissing the silly idea of snow beasts in the cold light of day. Along their ascent, they encounter a band of monks busy with the peculiar activity of harvesting snow for their looms. The monks take them into their monastery, where they provide heat, refuge, and a modest repast. Igor shudders at the odd fare, while Nanny fortifies herself on it with glee, her iron stomach unflappable as ever. Finally, they arrive at the mountain's radiant emerald, Duckula luxuriating in victory as he declares, "I, Count Duckula, do now claim this mountain for Transylvania." As always, his triumph is more hot air than reality, and the show ends with Igor and Nanny suffering through another of Duckula's self-congratulatory outbursts. As ever, his tireless pursuit of wealth and glory ends not in triumph, but in ridiculous comedy, the ultimate distillation of his endless round of ambition, bad luck, and farce.
Ready? Take aim!
Episode 13, Duckula. Occasionally, even a vampire requires a day off, and in this series, Count Duckula decides he's had his fill of terrorizing villagers. He refuses point blank to carry out his vampire chores, much to the dismay of Igor. Duckula grumbles he's had quite enough screaming for one day, and isn't in the mood to terrorize anyone. Igor reminds him of a binding contract Duckula had irresponsibly signed under the impression that it was an autograph for his little niece. Ignoring Igor's advice and with pangs of hunger, Duckula charges to the kitchen. Igor attempts to punish him by imprisoning him in the larder, but Duckula ends up head-bashing and is afflicted with amnesia. I adore the way Duckula's slothfulness bites him back in such over-the-top yet humorous fashion. It's pure cartoon anarchy. The larder mishap creates a perfect slapstick loop that propels the rest of the episode's comedy. Grasping this as an opportunity, Igor enthusiastically tries to re-educate Duckula in the art of being a decent vampire. The amnesiac Count is appalled by neck-biting at first, declaring it disgusting, but Igor persuades him it's to be expected, highly enjoyable, and even fun. Euphoric, Igor sets off to take his newfound villainous master on a visit to the village. But Nanny's good-natured but hapless interventions keep thwarting the plan. At one stage, she accidentally whacks Duckula over the head with her feather duster, immediately restoring his kind vegetarian personality. Another inadvertent bump, later, switches him back to his vampire form, creating a side-splitting cycle of personality shifts. The continual memory swaps back and forth are genius. It's as if Duckula has a dual personality ruled solely by Nanny's clumsiness. One of the only episodes where Duckula's personality shifts back and forth in quick succession, it is a fan favourite for slapstick humour. The mayhem further intensifies as Dr. von Goosewing arrives in disguise as a vacuum cleaner salesman. He comes armed with his Super Turbo GT Special Vampire Exterminator in an effort to finally trap Duckula. Nanny, as usual, misinterprets and invites him in, believing he is there to assist with housework. A wild chase around the castle follows, and Duckula Nanny, and Goosewing repeatedly are struck on the head. By the end, the whole group is left entirely amnesiac and bewildered, and Igor's grand scheme is in tatters. The episode ends with the familiar sound of Duckula's tortured screams ringing out over the night. The last scene is complete mayhem and comedy gold, 3 characters, 1 castle, and full-blown amnesia all around. The reliance on repeated headbanging as a joke is a time-honoured device in this series, underlining the cartoon's light-hearted absurdity.
Boat!
Me?
Yes, Nanny, you.
Episode 14, Mississippi Duck. Igor is shocked at Castle Duckula when his master will not carry out his vampire work. Duckula has tired of yelling at villagers to frighten them. Igor demands Duckula accepted a binding contract for his part, although Duckula complains that Igor swindled him into signing it, claiming he was giving an autograph. Famished and irritable, Duckula bursts into the kitchen to be sidetracked by Nanny's odd comments about squeezed-out mouses. While searching the castle, Duckula stumbles into a dimly lit, cobweb-covered hallway. Nanny's clumsiness knocks him over and he bumps his head. When he regains consciousness, he is amnesiac, thinking he is a regular aristocrat. Duckula is horrified when Igor tells him he is a vampire. Repulsed at the prospect of biting necks, Duckula rejects Igor's efforts to bring back his purported true self. Igor, certain he is succeeding, creates a practice victim from the local village, but Nanny brings about another accident. The second bump has the effect of reversing the memory loss, and Duckula regains his comfortable vegetarian and firmly non-vampiric personality. The mayhem is amplified when Dr. von Goosewing appears, masquerading as a door-to-door vacuum cleaner salesman. His scheme is to sneak into the castle and once and for all eliminate Duckula from the face of the earth. Nanny, as usual, lets him in thinking he has come to do some housework. While Goosewing struggles to show his true colours, Duckula quarrels with Igor, holding a broccoli sandwich aloft to prove he is a man of peace. A struggle ensues, and all 3, Duckula, Nanny, and Goosewing, are hit on the head in rapid succession. The outcome is comedic befuddlement. All 3 lose their memories entirely. None of them know who they are, what their duties are to be, or why they are at the castle in the first place. Igor's wishes are thwarted once more, and the episode ends with the 3 running around in a haze of forgetfulness, the Count's vampiric fate unresolved once more.
Down, I've had enough of this. Igor, Nanny. Igor! Nanny!
Episode 15, The Mysteries of the Wax Museum. Count Duckula, Igor, and Nanny embark on their exceedingly rare Transylvanian holiday, ending up in the crowded streets of London in pursuit of adventure, and by adventure, Duckula primarily refers to sightseeing with aspirations of fame. Theirs is a curiosity that leads them to a wax museum rather than the more usual Madame Two Swords show, one that will disastrously backfire in a comedic manner. The owner of the museum, Dr. Matrix, also referred to as Matrix, introduces his remarkable 3-dimensional facsimile producer and persuades Duckula to have wax models created of himself and his employees. Duckula, naturally self-absorbed, is overjoyed at the possibility of having his anatomical construction preserved in wax, fantasizing about his own heroic diorama. In the meantime, Matrix has secretly designed these realistic androids to hold up the Bank of England during the night. A typical villain with a machine joke, pure and simple, straight from 1980s cartooning. When the wax clones come to life, things get out of hand. The androids malfunction, even trying to disconnect Matrix. Again, showing that Duckula's ego tends to draw in disaster and ineptitude in equal proportions. The actual Duckula, Igor, and Nanny attempt to go to the museum, which is closed. Sheer comedic coincidence has detectives Hawkeye Serves and Dr. Potson, tributes to Holmes and Watson, on the scene, and absurdly misidentify the actual trio as the Crooks, due to an outrageously accurate radio report containing a fat hen with one arm in a sling and an elderly balding vulture by the name of Igor. There follows a mad chase around London, featuring boats, canals, and traditional slapstick mishaps. Duckula's ego is on show as he tries to be a hero But it's the same combination of misjudgment, Nanny's blindness, and Igor's exasperated patience that drives the mayhem. So eventually the three find themselves miles from home, discovering that their castle has gone back to Transylvania, and Duckula is frustrated, but still as pompous as ever. The episode spoofs heist movies and the age-old mistaken identity gag in cartoons, with a nod to Sherlock Holmes, courtesy of Hawkeye and Potson. The Wax Museum joke is probably inspired by the real Madame Tussauds of London. A good bet for a first time Duckula ventured into the real world. Individually, I appreciate the way the androids rebel against Matrix. Its traditional technology backfires humour and one-upmanship on Duckula's ego. Even the most diabolically drawn villainy can't avoid the mayhem he brings. Nanny getting herself into trouble as ever is best Duckula. And Igor's long-suffering sarcasm steals quiet moments without any action being spoken.
Help! Help! Someone, anyone! Help!
Episode 16. The Lost City of Atlantis. Count Duckula, Igor and Nanny are lost at sea on the immense ocean, a place both lovely and frightening, since it spreads across over 3/4 of the surface of the planet. Away from the luxuries of Castle Duckula, the group's tiny boat is battered about by the waves, and Duckula is soon reduced to hysterics, crying, "It's all her fault," blaming Nanny for their nautical disaster. True to character, Nanny has practical but ridiculous ideas, including asking somebody the way, which Duckula shoots down sarcastically, and even sending a message in a bottle is out due to their failure to possess a bottle, paper, or pen. Their survival attempts hit highest absurdity when Nanny has the idea of using the lifeboat as an airplane, a classic example of the show's clever balance of whimsy and slapstick. Just when despair is at its peak, Duckula's sharp, if rather late eye, catches sight of an island, which Nanny instantly visualizes as a seaside haven strewn with coconuts. And yet it is beneath the surface that the real surprise awaits. Their vessel starts to founder, resulting in the uncovering of the mythic city of Atlantis. Here, the episode neatly interweaves fantasy with Duckula's hapless misadventures. The Atlanteans, in terror of exposure to surface inhabitants, immediately enslave Duckula and his friends, chaining them up to fuel the boilers that run the city's air compressors. Duckula's accustomed haughtiness and Nanny's ingenuous good cheer conflict amusingly with Igor's fatalistic practicality as they stumble through the drudgery and humiliation of bondage. Their confinement is temporarily disrupted by Captain Mino and the Tortillas, who propose a suicide escape in a submarine. This high seas pursuit is laced with typical Duckula slapstick, ending in destruction of Mino's ship and depositing the trio once again on a deserted island. Duckula tries to raise spirits with a harmonica solo, to the audible dismay of Igor, underscoring the recurring theme of the show. Even Duckula's attempts at raising spirits annoy everybody else. The episode satirizes Atlantis myths cleverly and adventure cliches, including underwater civilizations and survival at sea. For me, personally, Nanny's message in a bottle idea is the ideal representation of her charming, clueless logic, ridiculous, yet somehow lovable. Besides, the repeated stranded on an island running gag further underscores the show's constant commentary on Duckula's incompetence and grandiose ego. Fun fact, the name Tortillas for Captain Mino's crew could be a rather understated pun on the circular, confined nature of Duckula's escapades, always in circles, never quite making it home. Episode 18, Bad Luck, Duck. Friday the 13th makes Castle Duckula a centre of disaster, much from Nanny's fervent superstition. Duckula, in an unusual display of patience, resolves to debunk these irrational superstitions, pushing taboos such as walking beneath ladders, chewing hemlock, and even gazing at a solar eclipse. Even with his melodramatic self-assurance, Nanny's hysterics and his own ironic narration constantly undermine him. The episode is more heightened when Dr. von Goosewing materializes, equipped with his Mark 12 vampire killer, only to be constantly thwarted by Nanny's hapless interventions. At one point, she even breaks a mirror while attempting to defend her ducky boos, contributing to the mayhem. Duckula's battle against superstition is so funny because his cool, logical exterior is totally destroyed by Nanny's frenzied activity. The episode's brilliant use of traditional Friday the 13th superstition parodies cartoons with cultural folklore. The day wears on, and Duckula's hopes are dashed when Igor reminds him it's still Friday the 13th. Panic strikes, and he grabs his naughty rabbit foot, sure it's his sole shield against ill fortune. The narrative amusingly juxtaposes Duckula's cockiness with Nanny's ingenuous bravery, illustrating the unexpected misadventures that always sabotage even the most logical schemes. The episode is a spoof of superstition, and a celebration of the show's fondness for timing and slapstick at the same time. I adore how every single scheme Duckula plots is instantly foiled. It's a brilliant combination of humour and mayhem. Nanny's hysterical bout of superstition is an ongoing trope that ratchets up the tension and the comedy, emphasising her quirky, erratic thinking.
It was Nancy.
Season 3, 1990 to 1991. Episode 1, Private Beak. It begins with Count Duckula experiencing extreme boredom within Castle Duckula. He bemoans having a humdrum life, and reading detective stories does not even spark his interest. Igor, his faithful butler, recommends summoning Nanny to bail him out, but Duckula will have none of it, despite Nanny's immediate arrival bursting a typical wall along the way. Fed up with his pair of lunatics and drab castle, Duckula concludes he requires a new life associated with fun and thrills. Nanny's dramatic entrances never get old. They're a signature gag in the series. Personally, I love how her chaos is always played for humour without ever feeling malicious. Having been reading detective novels, Duckula gets inspired to become a detective. He will have a detective agency and changes up the castle to be an office. Visualising it in Chicago, since Transylvania, he believes, is not detective material. He tells Igor to paint his new moniker, Philip Mallard, spelled in reverse on the door to make it stylish. But Nanny tries to assist by actually removing letters from the alphabet to type out letters, making a mess rather than anything else. Philip Mallard is a mallard pun. I love how Duckula has a habit of hyperbolic remarks about how cool his ideas are, the quintessential Duckula shtick. It's a sluggish business at the beginning, and Duckula complains his wallet is on the critical list due to malnutrition. A mystery woman materialises out of nowhere, subsequently christened Mrs. Grocer or Angel Face, with a singular problem: her husband can't grow fibrous begonias. Duckula immediately recognises the problem besetting the plants, but then finds that there's a root issue: the husband is absent and suspected foully. Duckula vows to solve the mystery and spreads out $300 a day in expenses. Both Duckula's hunger for riches and his hunger for fame are common themes. I enjoy how the writers spoof the usual hard-boiled detective genre character in casting a vegetarian vampire duck in this role. Their search takes Duckula, Igor and Nanny to a tea shop, where they are roughed up and bound to chairs. Following them is Nanny, who inadvertently rescues Duckula through messy diversions. Eventually, they uncover the lost husband is Wilbur Forrest. All along, Nanny is still dispensing plant advice to Duckula's annoyance. Duckula's constant conflict between having to be serious and Nanny's innocent destruction supplies endless comedy. Subjectively, it's a favourite episode because it features detective spoofs alongside slapstick humour. Back at the end of the day, Duckula, Nanny and Igor find themselves transported back to Castle Duckula, which automatically returns to Transylvania at dawn, Eastern Transylvanian Standard Time. Duckula regrets that his fantasy about becoming a great detective was not realised to end another hilarious escapade at his family homestead. The default return to the castle is a running gag that seems to always remind audiences that regardless of how insane a mission Duckula embarks on, he will never quite be able to escape his Transylvanian heritage.
You have destroyed 800 billion drachmas worth of spaceship.
Episode 2, Astro Duck. In the Astro Duck episode, Count Duckula is busy with a computer game, Invasion of the Muscoids, when a lightning bolt strikes the castle. The power surge gives his computer life, and it starts talking to him, saying that its circuitry has been changed to provide it with capabilities much greater than its original design. Discovering Duckula's games to be kids' stuff, the computer introduces him to the adventure of hacking. It shows him its capability by creating a citywide traffic jam and then depositing 10 million drachmas in Duckula's bank account. But Duckula finds these actions dull and uninteresting. He insists on more adventure and action, threatening to pull the plug of the computer if it cannot offer real fun. To make his master happy, the computer breaks into Transylvanian space headquarters, trash systems, causing a huge computer failure that leads to the early launch of their deep space probe, a 800 billion drachma or more worth of asset. Duckula is overjoyed, thinking he is playing an incredibly realistic game as he flies the probe to a flawless landing on the moon. His fun is short-lived when the computer simulates an overload and goes into a self-destruct sequence. The truth of the matter is revealed when trash officials close in on the castle, blaming Duckula for espionage and ordering him to pay for the probe or get it back. When Duckula panics for a moment, he is inspired by Nanny's idea of flying the castle to the moon. He quickly attributes the concept as his own master plan and departs with Igor and Nanny. Their moon landing, however, destroys the winner of a prize garden belonging to a small green alien, who furiously directs them to the spot where the space probe has also crashed nearby. They anchor the probe to the castle for its return trip. Back inside, the computer restarts, its self-destruct having been a temporary failsafe. Dispensing with Duckula's objections, the naughty machine just wants to have more fun, remotely firing up the probe's engines and sending it, and the castle attached to it, on another bumpy ride in
One condition.
Anything!
I must have that sweetie of a butler too.
Episode 3, Unreal Estate. For once, Count Duckula admits what's been obvious all along. He loathes his ancestral home. The castle is damp, creaking, worm-eaten, and in his eyes more depressing than dignified. While his forefathers thrived on its gothic gloom, Duckula dreams of something more glamorous. His solution? Put the family fortress on the market. Having a rhyming curse concealed in his coffin, the castle digs itself up and starts an otherworldly house hunt, first materializing in Moscow and then attempting its fortunes in Hollywood. Hollywood soon produces a purchaser, none other than movie actress Miss Z.Z. Lamour. She becomes utterly enamored of the castle's strange tin horn elegance, believing it to be the ultimate set piece for her starry lifestyle. Duckula catches sight of his opportunity for freedom, but Igor and Nanny are appalled. To Igor, the sale of the castle is a blasphemy against the Duckula lineage. Nanny, on the other hand, declines to think about going anywhere other than home. They both mount sabotage plots in an effort to scare off Miss Lamour, but each prank rebounds. Even Duckula's own desperate contrivance, a plague of so-called Transylvanian plywood beetles, fails to shatter her determination. Instead, she's charmed by the offbeat floors. The greatest surprise is reserved for the end, when Miss Lamour makes Igor himself a condition of the sale. She can't resist his decrepit butler act and wishes him to be included with the furnishings. Picture the advert: 4 bedrooms, haunted crypt, and a cranky butler thrown in. In all seriousness, Igor may be the only amenity capable of increasing the price of the property. Just when Duckula thinks he's gotten rid of his dismal birthright, the castle gets the final say. At sunrise, the spell takes effect, and the building transports itself directly back to Transylvania, leaving Miss Lamour stranded in Hollywood, and returning things to the way they were. Duckula pouts at being stuck once more in his abhorred home, while Igor smiles, proclaiming it destiny that the Count be where he's meant to be. Rounding out the laughs are Dmitri and Sviatoslav, the 2 bats inhabiting the cuckoo clock that controls the movements of the castle. They add nothing to the story, but provide a running gag of dad joke puns and fourth wall asides, reminiscent of a feathered Statler and Waldorf. They are a reminder to audiences that, in the universe of Duckula, even housing markets are done for comedy. Episode 4, Bombay Duck, Castle Duckula. Life suddenly takes a drastic turn when a shimmery magic lamp materializes out of thin air. Duckula rubs the lamp, and pop! A genie emerges with a proposal of the very things he desires most: fame and wealth. Igor recognizes the trap at once, but Duckula, ever blinded by visions of gold, disregards the caution and follows the genie with alacrity into an unknown cave. The punchline, naturally. Rather than golden riches, he and his family are trapped within, while the evil master of the genie steals away the castle itself. As in so many of Duckula's escapades, rescue is not wrought by guile, but by Nanny's incompetence. She finds a second magical bottle, with another genie who actually makes wishes come true. She sets the three free with one wish. The only problem is, Nanny doesn't just let them go. In her enthusiasm, she sends them straight to India, that is, where their pilfered coffin and castle has been spirited away. There he encounters Princess Rana, a noble young princess coerced into marriage by the sinister lamp master. Duckula, caught up in the intrigue, finds himself rescuing her and retrieving his coffin along the way. For one brief, shining instant, he savours the radiance of being a hero. Duckula's benefits are always something else, however. Rather than jewels or power, Princess Rana presents him with a simple Transylvanian soup strainer, a gesture so ridiculous that it seems like an intentional poke at fairy tale convention. Of course, Duckula almost blows everything once more by running after more glory. Luckily, although he wouldn't say so, Igor orchestrates one of Nanny's notorious bone-crushing hugs to trap him safely within the castle until morning. At daylight, the magic of the castle becomes active and sends them back to Transylvania. Duckula pouts at missing his opportunity for adventure, while Igor almost grins with glee at the Count being brought back to his proper place. What makes Bombay Duck memorable is the ingenious double genie trick, one to ensnare, another to rescue. It's pure parody of Arabian Nights-style storytelling. Add in Princess Rana's ludicrous obsession with a soup strainer, and you've got one of the most tongue-in-cheek rewards in cartoon history. Fun fact, David Jason's performance as Duckula, balancing pomp, vanity, and childlike naivety, cements why this vampire remains so oddly lovable, even when luck constantly outsmarts him.
Good too. Pardon me, Mom, but you should taste some of this house. It's delicious.
Episode 5. There are werewolves at the bottom of our garden. Certain nights, even Castle Duckula becomes too loaded with surprises, and this is one of them. At the time of full moon, Nanny goes into a panic. Tozer, the werewolf that resides in the grounds of the castle, has disappeared and most likely is contracting a cold. Duckula, naturally, is confused. His castle has a werewolf, but he begrudgingly goes with Igor and Nanny on a trek through the forest. In the meantime, the insatiably fascinated Dr. von Goosewing tries out a new gadget, a machine designed to transform werewolves into vampire slayers. Of course, he unleashes Wolfie, his wolf, in hopes of attacking Duckula himself. Mayhem is assured. The grounds around the castle are stranger than anticipated. Nanny and Igor are meandering about and come across a talking tree along the way, while Duckula comes across a candy house out of a fairy tale. True to character, Duckula promptly sets about eating it, only to be apprehended by a witch who intends to dinner him. Just as he seems destined to be turned into casserole, Nanny bursts in, followed by Tozer sniffling but faithful as ever. The rescue is chaotic but successful, and the witch's cooking plans are foiled. As this is happening, Goosewing's invention spectacularly backfires. Wolfie turns not on Duckula, but on the doctor, chomping his sophisticated plan and leaving Goosewing battered, humiliated, and very much unvampired. Duckula, blissfully untouched, is left victorious, though he obstinately refuses to believe in werewolves, despite having just been saved by one. This episode is a maelstrom fairy tale crossover, with Hansel and Gretel, Little Red Riding Hood, and vampire lore all combined into a single crazy narrative. Duckula munching on a witch's candy roof mere moments before he would have been roasted alive is cartoon gold of the highest order, evenly blending suspense and absurdity with comedy. Another of the show's ongoing delights is Duckula's undermining of vampire conventions. He won't die in sunlight, he isn't hurt by garlic, and he can teleport whenever he feels like it. Anything but the fearsome Draculas of myth. Igor complains about this a lot, but it's what makes Duckula special. a vampire who is more affable, bumbling, and faintingly vulnerable than frightening. The success of the episode comes from its light-hearted mix of fairy tale and monster conventions, with Duckula as both hero and bumbling comic relief. Tozer's gentle but cowardly presence adds warmth, with Goosewing's hapless failure serving to highlight the show's traditional comedy.
I was talking to Igor, Nanny. I said, break out the spinnaker.
Said what?
Break out the spinnaker.
Episode 6, Duck Ahoy. Few things get Count Duckula going more than the prospect of money, and Duck Ahoy shows this to great comedic effect. Penniless once more, Duckula's eyes sparkle at the rumour of a high-stakes yacht race with a valuable prize. In an instant, he sees himself in the role of Captain Ahab, nobly plundering the high seas naturally, without the little detail that he doesn't actually own a yacht. Of course, the answer is to construct one from a kit. Step forward, Nanny, whose construction aid ensures pandemonium. All the family gets hammered on by mistake onto planks, instructions are done in reverse, and the great christening is performed using a can of Groovian cola, as opposed to the usual champagne. Her over-the-top recitation, "I christen this ship, blah, blah, blah," is comedy heaven and true Nanny, her endearing incompetence. When the race finally gets underway, all goes awry. Duckula claims the race is single-handed, but Igor and Nanny sneak aboard, sabotaging all attempts at dignity. Nanny drags the anchor rope around the course, as if it's a game of tug-of-war, making their humble yacht into a full-fledged tugboat. It's amazing that the boat didn't totally sink. Duckula, who fancies himself dignified, at first feigns that he won't cheat. Then, when the chance comes, teamwork ingeniously equates with outright cheating. He takes advantage of Igor and Nanny's hapless incidents to drive them into contention, exquisitely demonstrating the elastic morality characteristic of Duckula's nature. The climax is sheer ironic genius. After all the slapstick mayhem, close calls and bodily humour, Duckula's crew does finish first, only to find out the grand prize is awarded to the true winner, Belvedere Bold Mountain. Their reward? A Loch Ness Monster novelty swim ring. A joke so ridiculous it ranks as one of the show's best punchlines. Duckula's indignation at this meagre prize, conveyed in utmost outrage, serves to highlight the ideal send-up of underdog sporting fiction. In this case, the hapless hero's victory is ever bittersweet, if not totally futile. The show parodies traditional sports and competition storylines with Duckula's ego, opportunism, and hapless charm. Nanny's assistance and slapstick building sequences heighten the comedy, and Duckula's moral ambiguity is a running comedic theme. The show is often name-checked by viewers as one of the keenest combinations of parody, slapstick, and absurdist comedy in the series.
It is she who has the explaining to do. That is not mein great and Gretchen.
Episode 7, The Great Duck-tective. This is one of the most ingenious Goosewing plots in the whole series. Rather than bursting in with his garlic blaster as normal, he's impersonating Detective Hawkeye SS. The SS must be an intentional Sherlock parody, with his bumbling sidekick Podson at his heels. His plan: set up Duckula for killing his imaginary great-aunt Gretchen. I can't believe how ham-fisted the planted clues are. Blood in the fridge, bloody handkerchiefs, miscellaneous murder weapons just floating around. Even Duckula, normally oblivious, picks up that something's going on. Goosewing bursts in with his housekeeper, Mrs. Bludgeon, and goes all Poirot, flaunting all the clues. Duckula's arrested, and for once it seems like perhaps Goosewing has actually got the better of him. But Igor, deadpan mastermind that he is, works out what's going on. His plan: dress up as Fra Gretchen von Adelise herself. Watching Igor in that elaborate get-up is comedy gold. The manner in which Goosewing totally disintegrates when Aunt Gretchen arrives alive is priceless. He blurts out the entire fraud and confesses that he never had an aunt at all. The icing on the cake is Nanny's response. She is not shocked by Goosewing's deception, but by Igor's costume, which she considers indecent. Only in Duckula could the grand disclosure of the plot by the villain be upstaged by a joke about Igor's fashion sense. The most notable thing about this episode is the way it really plays like a parody of detective shows, nearly Scooby-Doo-esque, complete with misleading clues, disguises, and a dramatic unmasking. But it's also wonderfully ridiculous. Goosewing no longer needs Duckula's blood, it only wants him behind bars. Naturally, his scheme falls apart due to his own absurdity. It's one of those odd occasions where Igor, rather than Duckula, takes centre stage, and it's sincerely one of my favourites.
Okay, so I'll stop singing.
Episode 8, Dead-Eye Duck. There's no Duckula like a teleporting castle disaster. This week, Duckula fantasizes about sun-kissed beaches, but of course the castle materializes them in the Colorado desert instead. Yeehaw hijinks ensue. They encounter Marshal Quacker, described as the shyest gun in the West, who is such a nervous wreck that he literally employs Duckula to pretend to be sheriff while he hides in the back. Duckula, overjoyed at the prospect of fame and adoration, jumps at his new title as Dead-Eye Duckula, even though he can't get a gun out of his holster without botching it. The city of Dodgy City is under siege by the Nasty Brothers, who are such an absurd gang that they're almost endearing. Nasty Colin is the best of them. His singing is so terrible, it's deemed more deleterious than outright crime. Duckula manages to put a stop to him with an almighty nudge from Marshal Quacker, and suddenly he becomes the darling of the town with the devotion of luscious Lulu Bell. Naturally, Duckula laps it up, strutting around like he's Clint Eastwood, despite having done basically nothing. Then there is the show's masterstroke. Nanny inadvertently lets slip Marshal. Quacker has been deceased for 40 years. Yeah, Duckula's been filling in as sidekick to a ghost. The twist is so serendipitously dropped that both Duckula and the viewer are left stunned. And Duckula's shocked expression is laugh-out-loud material. It turns the whole episode upside down. This wasn't a goofy Western spoof, it was a ghost story in disguise. The grand finale at the Okey-Cokey Corral puts the icing on the cake. Duckula attempts every possible dodge to get out of the confrontation, but the Nasty Brothers ride over him nonetheless. It's one of those episodes in which Duckula's cowardice and vanity are put front and centre, but the added supernatural element keeps it new. Between ghost sheriffs, awful singing villains, and a corral confrontation, this may be the most American parody the series ever produced, and it works completely.
Carry into her takeoff mode.
All right.
Whoops!
Episode 9, The Show Must Go On. This is a theatrical spoof from top to bottom, and it's glorious mayhem from the first curtain to the last. It begins with the gang going to see Hamlet, where Nanny, being her literal-minded self, pours water over the ghost. This inspires Duckula's great idea. If he can't find success as a singer or an explorer, maybe the theatre will at last deliver him fame. And so, Jack and the Magic Walnut comes into being, with Duckula starring, writing and directing naturally. The rehearsals are a disaster. Nanny plays the good fairy, but she keeps talking to invisible wood elves and bungles her lines. Costumes are upside down, props collapse mid-scene, and the Magic Walnut looks like something straight out of a kindergarten play. My favourite running gag is the scenery constantly falling over, as if the castle itself is heckling Duckula's ambition. Meanwhile, Igor covers the entire debacle as the excuse for a jewel robbery. He recruits the same bunch of lowlifes from previous episodes, the lads, who sneak about disguised as extras, attempting to steal paintings, jewellery, and even a grand piano as the cast bumbles through rehearsals. It's such a grossly cynical Igor thing to do. He doesn't care about Duckula's art, but he jumps at the opportunity to plunder the joint. Opening night is a Shakespearean catastrophe. In the crucial cupboard scene, Duckula is to get hidden away, and Nanny bursts in with the walnut. Instead, the castle has had enough and teleports during the middle of the performance. The thieves are stranded, Duckula's play falls apart, and all his aspirations of being a star are reduced to nothing. This episode gets the egotistical actor cliché perfectly, while still retaining Duckula's special sauce. He doesn't crave art, he craves applause. And of course, he receives nothing but embarrassment. It's a spoof of theatre kids, terrible amateur shows, and even heist movies all in one. The best thing is that it almost works, except for Nanny and the castle's unreliable magic. But of course, Duckula's destiny is endless frustration.
Here's one for you, Igor.
Episode 10, A Christmas Quacker. Christmas at Castle Duckula is never a formula for success, and this episode sets the madness at an all-time high. The festive spirit is short-lived when Duckula stumbles upon a hideous family secret. The original Count Duckula was not a vampire. Encouraged by this epiphany, Duckula concocts what he thinks is the perfect plan to travel back in time, prevent his forefather from being transformed, and rid himself once and for all of the family's creepy legacy. Igor, in private dismay at his master's guilelessness, but ever the facilitator, recommends turning the castle clock around as their means for travelling through time. Duckula, in his absolute failure to notice the ridiculousness, enthusiastically consents, paving the way for a side-splittingly catastrophic quest. I adore the way Duckula's excitement prevents him from noticing the daftness of Igor's scheme. It's pure over-the-top cartoon thinking. Utilising the castle clock as a time machine is a quintessential example of the programme's combination of gothic atmosphere and zany humour. Their initial stab takes them to Hampton Court in the Tudor period. Playing it off as a day trip, Duckula is caught by Queen Elizabeth I and the original Count Duckula, already a bona fide vampire, trying to bite the Queen's neck. In one of absolute farce, Duckula ineptly tries to stop him, only to be misinterpreted by everyone at court. His first attempt at altering history comes to utter humiliation when he is ejected. Duckula's courteous but futile efforts at heroism in the Tudor court are worth their weight in gold. He's a vegetarian in a vampire universe. The Tudor setting cleverly combines historical satire with the absurd comedy style of the show. Unfazed, they rewind the clock and go further back to 1199. There, Duckula discovers his ideal ancestor, sunny, sweet, vegetarian, and even instructing a pet bat to speak. For one instant, it looks as though his scheme will succeed. But Igor, true to vampire custom, secretly instructs the bat to bite necks rather than talk. That one misdeed condemns the benevolent ancestor to vampirism, guaranteeing Duckula's bloodline is not altered. Igor's cunning manipulation is evil and funny. He actually contrives Duckula's failure while appearing to be loyal. This episode astutely covers the topic of inevitability, demonstrating that whatever Duckula does, history can't be changed. Back in the present, Duckula has a priceless Christmas tantrum, realizing his dream, his heritage, and his holiday plans are all destroyed. The episode performs perfectly as a holiday special and an amusing lesson in fate, family, and the inevitable power of tradition.
Well, this time there aren't going to be any...
Episode 11, The Rest is History. Just when you think you've seen every possible villain on Duckula, along comes an egg. A giant, moody, unhatched egg-plotting world domination. And honestly, it works. The egg is one of the strangest antagonists ever introduced, but it's so absurd that it circles back to genius. The egg wants Castle Duckula not for its gothic charm, but because it sits atop the world's biggest reserve of unium, a cheeky uranium parrot. With this, it plans to power its oppositron ray, a machine designed to make all fuel obsolete. That's not just a goofy plan, it's diabolically clever satire, poking fun at Cold War doomsday weapons. Of course, Duckula and crew are just nuisances in the way, so the egg dispatches its sly agent, Lucretia Overeasy. Yes, the pun is glorious. She plays Duckula like a fiddle, convincing him he's been chosen for a hush-hush, top-secret spy mission. Naturally, Duckula leaps at the chance, picturing himself as James Bond, cape flaring in the wind. Igor rolls his eyes so hard, you can practically hear them creak. The mission sends them chasing stolen plans at Trash, Transylvania Space Headquarters, disguised as a garbage dump. Because why not? Duckula struts around as a secret agent extraordinaire, while Nanny's blunt, why not just ask, method actually solves half the puzzle. It's a lovely gag, about how Duckula's self-importance constantly trips him up. Meanwhile, the egg successfully takes over the castle. When Duckula returns, he stumbles into the egg's big reveal, the oppositron ray, the world domination scheme, the whole shebang. And here's the kicker, Duckula himself comes up with the solution. He suggests moving the castle, which breaks the egg's plan entirely. For once, his ridiculous castle powers save the day. But in perfect Duckula fashion, the victory is hollow. The egg is arrested for endlessly saying the taboo E-word, and Duckula himself is carted off too this time for transporting his castle illegally. His smug "I saved the world" moment lasts about 5 seconds before he's in handcuffs. Classic. This episode is peak parody Bond, sci-fi, Cold War politics, all scrambled into one deliciously weird omelette. Episode 12. 00 Duck. If you thought the spy parody in the last episode was funny, this one goes full throttle. The setup? Nanny, of all people, wins a cruise on her favourite game show, Super Duper Double Drachma Deal, by correctly answering a question about James Watt. The fact that Nanny knows who James Watt is might be the most unbelievable twist of the entire series. Duckula, of course, hates the sea, hates holidays, and hates the idea of spending a week surrounded by rough, tough, seafaring men. But he's dragged along anyway, grumbling all the way. The cruise ship, the Transylvania, is captained by Farley, a bizarrely chipper fellow who actually seems charmed by Nanny. Duckula, feeling sidelined, decides to puff himself up as a naval expert, which goes about as well as you'd expect. His attempt to open a portal on the windward side ends in chaos, with sails flapping, crew panicking, and Nanny accidentally smashing the ship's wheel. Things get eerie fast. The ship is discovered completely abandoned at breakfast, echoing the real-life mystery of the Mary Celeste. Igor gives a chilling history lecture, while Duckula slips into gentleman detective mode, magnifying glass in hand. His big revelation? The ship has been abandoned. Not exactly Poirot-level deduction, but Duckula delivers it with full drama, as if he's cracked the case of the century. For a while, it plays like a genuine ghost ship story, with Duckula relishing his moment as a sleuth. But the punchline is perfect. The entire crew had just been hiding. That's it. They reappear, reclaim the ship, and strand Duckula, Igor, and Nanny. The build-up to mystery, suspense, and even horror collapses in one brilliantly dumb anticlimax. What makes this episode shine is how it skewers both detective fiction and naval adventures in one go. Duckula desperately wants to be the hero, the suave spy, the brilliant detective, the master navigator. Instead, he's just a pompous bystander to Nanny's clumsy chaos and Igor's snide asides. It's parody layered on parody, with Duckula, the eternal fool, at its centre. Episode 13, Mystery Cruise. This finale is one of the most ambitious plots in the season, blending travel adventure, racing, and Van Helsing's endless vendetta into one whirlwind. It begins at London's Explorers Club, where Dr. Van Helsing, or Vanink, concocts yet another scheme to destroy Duckula. His plan? Exploit the castle's teleportation by tricking Duckula into a world race that will burn the system out, leaving him stranded. Enter Sibelius Smug, the perfect stooge. Smug is a pompous explorer itching for one last adventure, and Van Helsing convinces him to challenge Duckula to the greatest competition of the decade. The rules: no scheduled airlines. Duckula, of course, thinks this is his golden ticket to fame, wealth, and adoration. He accepts with gusto, picturing himself crowned champion. The race kicks off in grand style, with Smug and his butler, Billy Doo, tailing Duckula's castle in a hot air balloon. From Paris to Spain to jungle landscapes, the episode is a globe-trotting parody of Around the World in 80 days. Duckula tries every trick to shake them, but Smug is always right behind, smugly waving. Duckula's frustration is delicious. He's so close to glory, yet constantly one-upped. Meanwhile, Goosewing lurks nearby, gleeful at the thought that the castle will burn out and strand his quarry. And sure enough, the castle seems to sputter and die mid-race. Smug gloats, convinced of victory, while Duckula panics. But Igor drops the bombshell. Smug's balloon was tethered to the castle the whole time. He wasn't keeping up. He was cheating without even realizing it. It's one of the best gotcha gags of the series. The final twist is pure Duckula irony. Just as he's celebrating his impending fame, a notice appears. Dawn, Eastern Transylvanian Standard Time. Translation: the race isn't finished, and Duckula's victory dance is premature. Once again, fame slips through his wings. This episode is a perfect season capstone. Lavish, silly, packed with parody, and anchored by Duckula's eternal downfall. He wants glory so badly, but destiny and comedy always keep him the butt of the joke.
The finishing line first!
Season 4, 1993. Episode 1, Around the World in a Total Daze. Count Duckula's boredom sets off yet another outlandish escapade. He commands his sorcerous castle to transport him to a distant Pacific island, but the mercurial building instead docks on top of a busy New York City department store. First, Duckula is enraged, but Igor dryly refers to the city as the giant lemon or the big mango. Duckula's anger soon gives way to exhilaration when he comprehends that they are in the Big Apple and learns that they have been taken for victims of the store's in-store Transylvania week. With the prospect of turning a profit, Duckula enthusiastically plays the part of a shopkeeper to Igor's horror. Duckula's skill at converting frustration to greed is ridiculous and lovable. It's cartoon opportunism in its best form. The show playfully spoofs New York stereotypes, with Igor delivering straight-faced asides along the way. Duckula starts selling priceless family treasures to quirky clients. Mr. Shush Boomer buys the hand-carved family clock for $3,000, saying his old bat of a wife simply has to have something Transylvanian. Shortly afterwards, glamorous Miss Lamour turns up, demanding some Transylvania for her flat. Out of sheer avarice, Duckula actually offers Igor for sale as a genuine Transylvanian butler, to Igor's dismay. Nanny is given the job of delivering Igor, resulting in her usual mayhem, stopping the subway, warping the Brooklyn Bridge, and even snapping the arm from the Statue of Liberty while attempting the task. Nanny's calamitous deliveries are slapstick gold. She makes ordinary errands into metropolitan catastrophes. The Statue of Liberty gag is a humorous exaggeration, with Duckula's misadventures presented as preposterously outsized. The plot falls apart swiftly. Miss Lamour protests Igor assisting with the cooking by volunteering to give blood, and other shoppers bring back their goods, seeking refunds. Duckula comes too late to understand that the teleportation of the castle relies on its clock, which he sold, so they are left stranded. As despair unfolds, Mr. Shush Boomer redeems the clock, grumbling that it doesn't tell the time, and speaking corny jokes taken as demands for artichokes. When the clock is restored, the castle teleports instantly to Transylvania, leaving devastation, confused customers, and Duckula's business venture a flop. Duckula's fantasies of success and adventure always end in spectacular debacle, but the mayhem and humour make it infinitely entertaining. This episode highlights the ongoing theme of Duckula's greed and impulsiveness, blowing up in his face in the most over-the-top, hilarious ways.
Want any artichokes, understand?
Episode 2, Manhattan Duck. This adventure transports Count Duckula, Igor, and Nanny to the white-tipped mountains of Roriania, the venue of the Dangle Goggle Grand Winter Sports Competition held once a year. Duckula becomes immediately involved in a race with Nanny to the village, with Coco and Chalky Pickies as the prize. Meanwhile, two affluent individuals, Gaston and Pierre, hatch a plot to kidnap one of the affluent young ladies who are present. Duckula is set on conquering the winter sports tournament, thinking that winning will end his life of solitude and gain him the love of Miss Fetal Goggle. He takes part in contests such as the ski jump and a luge, most probably a downhill race. Gaston and Pierre, with the intent to kidnap a wealthy woman from the Dangle Goggle revolving restaurant, try to disguise themselves by wearing stockings on their heads to become incognito. They try specifically to pick the last rich young womans to pass by. Duckula does well in the ski jump, breaking a new record of 48.05 seconds. But Gaston and Pierre's scheme goes wrong when they unwittingly abduct Nanny, a fat, ugly 7-foot hen, according to their description. Nonetheless, Duckula takes the gold medal and a night out with Miss Dangaro 1989. The episode ends with Nanny screaming in the background and Duckula clueless about the real kidnapping, still obsessed about Miss Tangle Goggle, which leaves the hapless kidnappers with an unforeseen hostage. This one goes firmly into slapstick. The sight of two career kidnappers mistakenly abducting Nanny and then coming to realize too late what a blunder they've made is classic Count Duckula mayhem. The winter sports backdrop was a cheeky satire of Olympic-type contests, particularly ski-jumping broadcasts popular on television during the late 80s. Gaston and Pierre are regular foreign villain stock characters in British cartoons, making fun of typical French crooks. Episode 3, Alps a Daisy. Not all adventures match their billing, and in this installment, Alps a Daisy gets off to a start much removed from the mountains in the Transylvanian city of Cluj. Count Duckula is a buzz with anticipation, getting ready for a live chat on the high-profile talk show In Conversation. Certain he's one of the cream de la cream, Duckula pines for his coming celebrity, unaware of the revolution being planned elsewhere. Under the leadership of the devious Gotcha, a rebellion is scheming to remove Prince Otto van Duckloth of Dlovia. Their initial efforts are a spectacular failure, partially due to them attempting to bribe palace guards with cabbages rather than money. Duckula's ego is beautifully on display here. He's so egotistical that he has no clue a coup is taking place. The show's title is Good-Natured False Advertising. The Alps aren't even referenced, reflecting the program's light-hearted sense of irony. The fortunes of the revolutionaries change when they view Duckula's interview. Duckula was booked on the show by mistake, as the producer believed him to be Hollywood actor Clint Douglas. Duckula's hapless performance is watched by the insurgents with interest, as they spot his striking resemblance to Prince Otto. Naja instantly conceives a bold plan. Duckula will impersonate the prince and, under national television, abdicate in their interest. I adore how Duckula cluelessness becomes a means for an actual coup. It's ridiculous, but mastermind. The show uses the traditional prince and the pauper trope cleverly as a parody, with Duckula being unwittingly cast as the double. Naja comes to Castle Duckula, disguising herself as a fan and stroking his ego. With visions of Hollywood deals and Oscars, Duckula gladly accepts the role and takes the castle to Dlovia. Meanwhile, Igor and Nanny become worried and go off to look for him, finally breaking into the palace. In characteristic style, they stumble over the guards and find the actual Prince Otto locked out of his own room. Thinking him to be a mischievous ducky booze joke, Nanny hugs him smotheringly in a huge bear hug and pulls him down to the castle for a nice cup of tea. At the climactic live transmission, Duckula dramatically makes the abdication speech. Just as he says the key line, the actual Prince Otto breaks free from Nanny and Igor and appears on air to challenge him. Duckula's fantasies of fame disintegrate in an instant. The coup collapses and pandemonium breaks out. Nanny, still believing it's a game, seizes her ducky booze, leaving Duckula's anguished cries ringing round the studio. Duckula's complete combination of vanity and cluelessness makes the botched coup funny. He never catches on. The show satirizes political power struggles with classic Duckula slapstick, demonstrating how one duck's ego can inadvertently affect a nation. Episode 4, Prince Duckula. This is one of those great Count Duckula tales in which his ego gets him into complete and utter mayhem. It starts with Duckula in a whirl of exhilaration as he's been invited to appear on a live TV chat show called In Conversation. To Duckula, this is evidence that he has at last made it into high society after all. Only the cream de la cream are asked to feature. Meanwhile, as Duckula practices strutting around, another plot thickens elsewhere. A band of revolutionaries, headed by the cunning Gotcha, are scheming to depose Prince Otto van Duckloth, the somewhat pampered ruler of Dlovia. Their initial revolutionary attempts have been laughable. One of the most comic facts being that they attempted to bribe guards with cabbages rather than cash. Classic Duckula comedy. Offhand, silly, and quintessentially British. Now fate comes into play. The revolutionaries just so happen to be watching Duckula's television debut. So amusing is this, because Duckula was actually invited by accident. The producer believed that they were hiring Hollywood actor Clint Douglas. Poor host Bettina is appalled when she discovers the error. But on with the show. Duckula naturally meanders through nonsensical subjects such as dendrochronology, tree ring dating, while appearing utterly misplaced. But the revolutionaries see something significant. Duckula is a dead ringer for Prince Otto. And with that, they suddenly have their ideal scheme. They'll employ Duckula as a decoy. He'll pretend to be the prince, deliver a national address, and step down from the throne in their place. From there, things only get crazier. Naja visits Castle Duckula, disguised as a besotted fan, and flatters his ego to perfection. She informs him that he has the presence and charisma of a real leading man and must lead a new film as Prince Otto. Of course, Duckula is blinded by visions of Hollywood fame, Oscars and red carpets, and jumps at the opportunity. In the meantime, the actual Prince Otto is being humorously depicted as a naughty boy who becomes frustrated with signing papers and decides to go for a nap rather than carry out his royal responsibilities. Trivia enthusiasts will appreciate that this is yet another superb satire of political leadership and celebrity culture. Duckula's ego fuels the entire story, while the revolutionaries' ineptness makes them equally absurd. For myself, I appreciate how the show blends so-ease-a-sharp parody with slapstick. The finale is sheer mayhem. Duckula, all dressed up as Otto, makes his grand abdication speech, only for Otto himself to burst in and throw everything into chaos. The coup falls apart, Duckula's plans for Hollywood stardom are dashed, and Nanny remains convinced it's all just a game. And naturally, the episode ends with Duckula's signature angry screams, his ultimate curse for pursuing fame. Episode 6. A Mounty always gets his duck. Life at Duckula Castle is normally drawn out in dismal tedium, but this time it's broken in the most peculiar way imaginable. Igor, believing he's seeing hallucinations from too little proper evil-doing, is appalled when he witnesses what appears to be a Royal Canadian mounted police officer on horseback, pursuing a swarthy fellow around the grounds of the castle. At first he won't accept it's genuine until rider and horse crash through the walls. This is Constable Geoffrey, and his horse, also Geoffrey, in pursuit of French-Canadian outlaw Marcel Melvini. The suggestion of a Mounty crashing through a Transylvanian castle is peak Duckula absurdity. It's random, weird, and funny. The Mounty motto, "A Mounty always gets his man," is amusingly distorted here, as Duckula gets into the action and never quite gets anything done. Duckula, smitten by the glamour of the red-clad Mounties, makes a bargain. He'll transport the castle to Canada if they'll accept him into their ranks. And sure enough, he's made Trooper Duckula, and his initial mission is to protect Marcel in the town jail. Unfortunately, Nanny arrives with her cocoa and chalky bickies, and in an attempt at kindness, she reveals a hole that she had drilled in the wall previously. Marcel gets away in a flash. Matters are further complicated when Geoffrey adds that Marcel has abducted his sweetheart, Anne-Marie, and has taken her as hostage. It's standard Duckula. He takes himself seriously in a new heroic part, only for Nanny to unravel all of it in a matter of seconds. Marcel Melvini is one of the few villains of Duckula to have a full-fledged romantic subplot with Anne-Marie, providing drama to the typical slapstick. Duckula and Geoffrey have no choice but to embark on a pursuit through the Canadian backwoods, led by Anne-Marie's faithful dog, Scott. They traverse forests, rivers, and rocky terrain, but Duckula's attempts at heroism consistently break down in absurd fashion. Later, they catch up with Marcel, who has bound Anne-Marie to a railroad track with a speeding train heading for it. Just as catastrophe appears imminent, Nanny reappears, this time pursuing Marcel to bring him his overlooked cocoa. Her independent, amateurish intervention quite wonderfully rescues Anne-Marie and causes Marcel to be captured once more. The narrative concludes with a wedding reception for Geoffrey and Anne-Marie at the castle, which Duckula thoroughly relishes until Igor interrupts and informs her that it is dawn, Eastern Transylvanian Standard Time. The castle suddenly teleports back home, truncating the celebration and leaving Duckula shrieking in exasperation as usual. Duckula's Mounty phase is one of his most amusing fixations, and of course it ends badly. This installment is both playing off Western and adventure adventure cliches. But in a goofy, Duckula way, Nanny is the hero, not the one saving the day. Episode 7, The Zombie Awakes. This episode takes headfirst plunge into dream logic, beginning with Count Duckula's recurring nightmare involving vegetables and Nanny's sleepwalking fondness. Meanwhile, mad scientist Dr. Quackbrain, a Bavarian staple, concludes that Duckula's brain would be ideal for his newest dream destruction experiment. Quackbrain sends his zombie aide, Morpheus, to abduct Duckula, and the chaos begins in earnest as a series of silly, absurd, and surreal events ensue. After Morpheus arrives, Nanny's sleepwalking causes destruction throughout Castle Duckula, smashing the conservatory, dining room, and drawing room. Duckula tries to keep the situation in hand at first, but the actual chaos is when he is hooked up to Quackbrain's dream monitoring machine. His dreams, giant tadpoles, threatening flowers, and troublesome bunnies come to life in the laboratory, reducing the facility to a state of absolute mayhem. Igor and Nanny's presence upsets Quackbrain's experiment even more, leading to one of the most visually creative sequences of the series. Quackbrain's scheme ultimately breaks down, and Duckula, Nanny, and Igor are sent back to their castle. Duckula, the very picture of serene absurdity, promptly resumes sleeping to escape Nanny's threatened spring clean. The episode acknowledges the 1980s infatuation with dream machines in science fiction and popular culture, as well as the time's affection for surreal visual comedy. Much of it reminds one of Looney Tunes and Ren and Stimpy visual comedy, where fantasy distorts reality in unimaginable manners. The anthropomorphic rabbits and flower-grown animals are over-the-top references to the era's cartoon aesthetic. I adore this episode myself for its absolute creativity. The intersection of dream worlds and reality results in a riotous, anarchic storyline. Duckula's calm reaction to sheer disaster, sleeping through catastrophes, is just right for his peculiar personality. Cowardly, daft, but charmingly unruffled in the midst of chaos. The mix of visual creativity, physical comedy, and surreal humor makes this one of the best of the series. Marvelous verdict. A solid, nostalgic overdose. And that's a wrap on Count Duckula's simply zany adventures. In all seriousness, no matter how many times he attempts fame, wealth, or simply a good meal, he always comes up broke, battered, or buried beneath his own disarray. But hey, that's what we love him for. From ghost towns to broccoli stalks, space battles to penguin uprisings, this veggie vampire duck shows that failure is as much fun as success, possibly more so. Igor remains sulking. Nanny continues bursting through doors, and von Goosewing continues demonstrating he's the world's worst vampire hunter. It's a formula for pure cartoon gold. So, if you ever get the feeling that life's a disaster, just take comfort in the fact at least you're not glued to a sofa by a pack of rebellious penguins, or selling your castle for jelly beans by mistake. Count Duckula is the living proof that being silly is an art form, and sometimes mayhem is the actual punchline. Okay everyone, thanks for hanging in there for this excursion into the wackiest castle in Transylvania. Don't forget to click that like button, leave your favourite Duckula moment in comments, and of course, subscribe for more fun content.